Chapter 1129. A total of 150,000 soldiers charged forward like a long dragon, chasing after the five-star army. It could be said that they were invincible. They did not even need Maori regularization to do anything as they continued to advance. Along the way, they could see the corpses of the five-star army soldiers lying on the ground. Unfortunately, most of them were from the Japanese Empire. Although Maori regularization could not bear to see them die, he knew that these people had betrayed them and deserved to die. After thinking about killing all of the Sensei Naganabu's men, it should be the Han people next. He could not help but become excited. The night passed by as they chased each other. By the time the next day dawned, they had already traveled 30 to 40 kilometers. When the sun rose and shone on their bodies, they felt a warm feeling. Fatigue also surged through their bodies. Reporting to General, the scouts at the front have sent news that General Fukada Tani's army has disappeared. Just as Maoli was lazily stretching his back on his horse, a personal guard walked over and said something that made him turn pale with fright. Disappeared? Could it be that they ran too fast and lost track of them? Maori regularization felt that something was wrong, but he did not think of the worst possibility. We didn't lose them, but they deliberately hid. General, we are surrounded by tall mountains. If someone wants to hide, it won't be easy to find them. The bodyguard didn't dare to speak nonsense without evidence, but he still had the ability to remind the general. They deliberately hid? How is that possible? Mao Li-jung still had a look of disbelief on his face, but soon his eyes widened. Clearly, he had thought of a possibility. He suddenly shouted, "Pass down the order! Pass down the order! Stop advancing and retreat immediately!" If Fukada Tani deliberately disappeared, then there was a big problem. The worst and most likely result was that he did not intend to help the general at all. On the contrary, he did all this to lure them into a trap. Maori regularization came to a realization, but it was too late, because just as he ordered the army to stop, and before the order had even reached the ears of the 50,000 soldiers, deafening battle cries suddenly came from the surrounding mountains. Then, countless bright-colored five-star army soldiers covered the sky and covered the earth. It was as if a large blanket was about to wrap them up completely. When the battle cries sounded, Maori regularization's expression became very bad. He did not think that the worst result would happen. Speaking of his previous impression of Fukada Tani, whether it was Maori regularization or Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, they did not completely trust him. According to the previous plan, they would only attack when the five-star army was defeated. But the strange thing was that the beginning of the battle was too smooth. Fukada Tani actually burned down the granary, and there were so many Japanese army corpses on the ground. Maori regularization also carefully looked at the corpses and found that the people on the ground had indeed died not long ago. It was all of this that dispelled all of Maori regularization's worries. Now that he thought about it, he was still too anxious. Even if Fukada Tani really fought with them against the five-star army, with his strength, how could he do all of this so easily? It was completely because he was forced too hard. Now that he finally saw the light of hope, he threw himself into it without caring about anything else. There's no need to retreat. Tell everyone to shrink the formation and resist as much as possible. As long as we can hold on for a while, the Supreme General will definitely send troops to save us. Maori regularization was worthy of being a commander for many years. When he saw the qualitative change in the situation, he immediately changed the battlefield strategy. However, facing the five-star army that had been prepared for a long time, even if Maori regularization's orders were accurate, once they reached here, everything would be over. 5 foreign divisions, plus more than 100,000 Japanese army led by Fukada Tani and Sensei Naganabu, a total of more than 200,000 people. And this was after they were prepared to deal with only 50,000 Maori regularization. There was no suspense at all about the result. The fierce battle began. Countless soldiers of the five-star army rushed towards the Japanese army that was surrounded. The sound of swords clashing could be heard endlessly. Under the great momentum, after resisting for less than an hour, the Japanese army's defensive formation began to show various loopholes. Gradually, the Japanese army began to surrender and kneel on the ground. The outcome of the battle was about to be decided. Not far from the center of the battlefield, Sensei Naganabu looked at Fukada Tani, who was also riding a tall horse, with a trace of envy and said, "Kuin Fukada, this time you have made a great contribution. Bugnam of Gojoseon will definitely record it down." "Ha ha ha, Meiji Kuin. I'll take your blessings. In fact, Bugnam of Gojoseon has already promised me the benefits I need. I'm very satisfied." When Fukada Tani said this, there was an unconcealable excitement on his face. Yes, the reason why the Maori regularization was surrounded was all because of Fukada Tani's betrayal. Ever since the Maori regularization appeared in front of him and spoke sincerely, Fukada Tani was not moved at all. However, he still pretended to accept everything in order to make a great contribution. Just like when the Maori regularization left, Fukada Tani went to find the 7th Army's commander, Tian Su, and the 1st Reserve Division's commander, Sukuda, and told them everything that had just happened. Fukada Tani's IQ was not low at all. He was chosen by Ashikaga Yoshimasa to stay in Ping and Beijing. He clearly understood the situation. The so-called Supreme General of the Japanese Empire was nothing more than a grasshopper after autumn. He would not be able to jump around for more than a few days. Not to mention, with what he had done, it would be strange if Ashikaga Yoshimasa would forgive him. The position of Supreme General? Only a fool would believe it so easily. Cooperating with such a person was simply courting death. Take advantage of your weakness to take your life. At this juncture, the most important thing was to find a way to step on him and maximize the benefits. In order to ensure that his rights and interests were not lost, Fukada Tani took the initiative to find Tian Su and Sukuda to report his work. From this point alone, it could be seen that he was very cautious. It was as if he was afraid that if he only went to find one of the commanders, the matter would be leaked and he would lose the credit. Fukada Tani underestimated Tian Su and Sukuda. The former was the commander of Long Fenglu and had a limitless future. The latter was the commander of the 1st Reserve Division and was in charge of 30,000 veterans. His future was also unpredictable. How could these two people steal Fukada Tani's credit? Therefore, this news was quickly sent to Yang Chendong in Ping and Beijing in the form of a telegram. Not long after, a telegram came back. First, he praised Fukada Tani's loyalty. Then, he stated that the 500,000 taels of benefits given by Ashikaga Yoshimasa were all for Fukada Tani's personal use. Not only that, once the Japanese Empire became a province of Yangtze, if he wanted, he could stay in the Japanese Empire and become a true Supreme General. This was Yang Chendong's breadth of mind. His vision had never been limited to a city or a place. His goal was the entire world. A small Japanese empire was nothing to him. Not to mention, when the Japanese Empire became a province in the future, it was necessary to have a local Supreme General. Only then could they avoid more internal friction. Fukada Tani's ability to lead troops into battle was average, but he was smart enough to see the situation clearly. Yang Chenong was very relieved to have someone like him manage the military of the Japanese Empire in the future. After Tian Su and Sukuda read the telegram, it was sent to Fukada Tani. He was extremely excited and repeatedly said that he would fully cooperate with the 5-Star Army's military operation and fight a beautiful battle for the world to see. Tian Su and Sukuda, who originally wanted to show off and prove themselves, would not let go of such an opportunity. After the three of them discussed, they came up with a military plan to lure the enemy in and surround them to destroy them. Everything was going smoothly. The Maori regularization was surrounded by more than 4 times the number of soldiers, completely cutting off any thoughts of escape. At this moment, Fukada Tani's face was full of smiles and joy. The surrounded Maori regularization was still struggling to lead his troops. From time to time, he would anxiously look behind him. He was waiting for the arrival of the Supreme General. With 50,000 reinforcements arriving, the gap in strength would be reduced. They would still have the strength to fight. At the very least, their chances of breaking out of the encirclement would be much higher. Unfortunately, the Maori regularization was destined not to be able to wait for reinforcements. At this moment, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was not feeling good either. He, who was following behind, had also fallen into the trap of the 5-Star Army. At this moment, he was surrounded by 30,000 veterans of the 1st Reserve Division and the 7th Army, who were all armed with firearms. At daybreak, Such a scene appeared in front of him. While Ashikaga Yoshimasa was shocked, he also felt a sense of powerlessness. He did not expect the situation in front of him to be like this. There were still too many questions that he did not understand. Taking advantage of the fact that the two sides were only surrounding each other and had not yet engaged in battle, Ashikaga Yoshimasa took the initiative to ride to the front of the army. He asked the two division commanders, Tiansu and Sukude, who were opposite him, "The two of you, I admit defeat this time. Before I fight to the death, there is one thing that I would like to clarify. Seeing that I may die, please tell me the answer. Don't let me be a confused ghost, okay?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa lowered his noble head just to ask a question. As the soon-to-be victors, Tiansu and Sukude, of course, would fulfill his request. Tiansu took the initiative to say, "Okay, as long as your question does not involve any military secrets, we can consider telling you the answer. Thank you." Imitating the Han people, Ashikaga Yoshimasa clasped his fist and bowed again. Then, he raised his head and asked, "Last night, your camp was ablaze. That should be the rations being burned, right? Also, there were so many corpses on the ground. I saw that they were indeed people who died not long ago. I want to ask, what is going on?" Chapter 11:30. If it weren't for the existence of these two facts, with Ashikaga Yoshimasa's suspicious personality, why would he take the initiative to chase after them? If that was the case, they wouldn't be trapped now. These two questions were really puzzling, but they didn't involve any military secrets. After Tiansu and Suku exchanged glances, Tiansu laughed and said, "Okay, then we'll fulfill your wish and let you be a ghost who understands everything. To tell you the truth, the provisions were indeed burned, but it's just moldy food. It can only emit the smell, but it can't be eaten. As for the corpses of the dead Japanese army soldiers, it's even easier to explain. During this period of time, there were many people in your country who opposed our five-star army. They took the opportunity to burn, kill, and loot, and did all kinds of evil. Because of this, many of them were captured. I just didn't expect them to play such a role before they died, but thinking about it, it's worth it." As soon as Tiansu's voice fell, Ashikaga Yoshimasa's face became very ugly. He didn't expect that those who died were actually his own people who opposed the five-star army. Those who were supposed to support him were now mercilessly killed on the battlefield and became bait for his own destruction. This scene was really unacceptable. Ashikaga Yoshimasa sat on the horse as if he was scared silly. Using this opportunity, the five-star army launched a general attack. Ashikaga Yoshimasa, whose will was affected, no longer had the energy to command the army. Coupled with the all-out assault of the 7th Army, the battle became one-sided from the beginning. Just before the sky turned dark, the main force of the Japanese army who lost the will to resist was destroyed, and most of them were captured. Among them, Ashikaga Yoshimasa and Maori regularization died in the battle. Even before they died, their final plan to escape from the Japanese Empire was not realized. The news of General Ashikaga Yoshimasa's death on the battlefield was spread by some deserters. The Japanese Naval Division General Kuroda Naganori, who was preparing to meet him in Changlu Prefecture, quickly left on a ship, taking 100,000 Japanese Army-Navy Division and disappeared into the vast sea. Even if the five-star Army-Navy Division and Navy Division went all out to chase after him, they still couldn't find him. When the news was passed back to Yang Qindong, although there was a trace of regret, he still gave the order to stop the chase. For the sake of a stray dog who escaped, sending 2 elite Navy divisions to chase after him was meaningless. With the escape of Kuroda, the general situation of the Japanese Empire was already set. The next step was to encircle and annihilate some of the opposition forces in the remote areas and re-establish the political system. It was not the first time that Yang Shi had occupied other forces, so he was already familiar with the way. In less than 5 days, Du Jin, who had come from Korea, arrived here. He was the governor of a province appointed by Yang Qindong. Judging from the time, he should have received the news a long time ago. At this point, the War of the Japanese Empire lasted 14 months from January 1458 to February 1459. The Japanese Empire became a part of Yang Xie's territory and changed its name to Japan Province. The governor was Du Jin, and the general was Fukada Tani. In order to maintain the stability and prosperity of Japan province, not only did Yang Xia open a lot of businesses here, but Yang Chundong also allowed 100,000 soldiers and 100,000 navy divisions to stay here. At the same time that Shaowei province was established, many mines were being developed at the same time. According to Yang Chindong's memories from his previous life, many mines that would take many years to be discovered were being developed one by one, especially silver mines. It could be imagined that with so many silver mines being developed, it would be a great financial support for Yang Xia's forces. Of course, these things were handed over to the new governor, Du Jin, to deal with. As Japan province was established and gradually stabilized, Yang Chindong's eyes began to move to the west, which was Biming and the grasslands. Before this, a piece of news first appeared in front of Yang Chindong. According to Su Yozhun, 50,000 Biming Navy divisions had arrived at Japan province's South Sea Road. Because communication was blocked, these people didn't know that the Japanese Empire had been replaced by Yang Xia's Japan province. They're here to give you a gift. All right, accept it. After receiving the news, Yang Chindong laughed and gave the order. In reality, this wasn't a coincidence. It was something that Yang Chindong had planned for a long time. Even the 4th Army Division, the 1st Cavalry Division, and the new army had been mobilized from the battlefield to welcome these 50,000 Biming Navy divisions. 50,000 Biming Navy divisions weren't much, not to mention that they had just been established, so their fighting strength was mediocre. The reason why Yang Chindong attached so much importance to them was to attack Biming Navy divisions and use this name to make a move against Biming. Yes, Yang Chindong had already decided to go to war with Biming. Since the other party wanted to attack the new 2nd Army, it would be impolite not to reciprocate. Of course, he had to return the favor. As for whether this battle would be a partial one or a full-scale one, it would depend on the development of the situation. Biming Navy divisions naturally knew Yang Chindong's intentions, especially the Navy Division General Song Yong. At this moment, he was standing on a ship in high spirits, looking at the Japanese army soldiers and civilians who were lining the streets to welcome him. South Sea Road, Tosa Prefecture. This place was close to the coastline and was also the only way for various forces to enter this place. Now, in front of the largest dock here, there were tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians of the Japanese Empire. They were shouting the slogan of the Celestial Empire to welcome the guests from afar. Song Yong, who was leading a group of Biming Navy divisions, had a full smile on his face. He was very happy in his heart. Everything in front of him made him very excited. After all, it would be strange if he wasn't in a good mood after receiving such a welcome. What made him the happiest was that on the way here, they had encountered the 5-star army at sea. At that time, he was very nervous. Everyone knew that the 5-star army's navy divisions were very powerful. Just when Song Yong was sweating cold sweat and was thinking about whether to return the fleet or not, the 5-star army's navy divisions suddenly retreated. It was as if they were afraid of them. The difference between heaven and earth made Song Yong a little confused, but he quickly remembered that he was representing Biming. Even if the great Ming dynasty was divided into two, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. It was still not something that anyone could spy on. It was precisely because of this experience that Song Yong was full of confidence in this operation. Even the powerful 5-star army's navy divisions didn't dare to be enemies with him. What else was there to be afraid of? As a result, his task this time should be very simple. Along the way, his mood became very happy. When he arrived at the island of the Japanese Empire, he saw the huge crowd here to welcome him. The trace of worry he had disappeared. Song Yong's mood was very good. With his hands behind his back, he walked forward steadily with a confident smile on his face. It gave people the feeling that as soon as they appeared here, they would be able to quickly solve the crisis here. After Song Yong got off the ship and received a warm welcome, more and more Biming soldiers also got off the ship one after another. After drifting on the sea for so many days, anyone would feel a little uncomfortable. Now that they could walk on land, and they were so welcomed, it was a very wonderful thing. The person in charge of welcoming Song Yong was a Japanese army general called Okabe Uchiyama. It was said that he was a very important general under Ashikaga Yoshimasa. He was responsible for receiving Song Yong and his party. This Okabe Uchiyama, who was not very tall and even looked a little wretched, seemed to be very good at grasping people's hearts. He had a smile on his face that made people feel like they were bathing in spring. He accompanied Song Yong all the way to a small town not far from the dock. General Song, we thank the great Ming Empire for sending troops to support us. In order to express our gratitude, the great Ming Empire has prepared food and wine, as well as beautiful women. We will certainly not let General Song down. At the same time, Okabe Uchiyama took out 2 banknotes worth 100,000 silver from his arms like a magic trick and put them in Song Yong's hand when no one was looking. Song Yong's eyes only glanced at the banknotes. After seeing the amount on it, the originally very happy Song Yong's face became even redder. He didn't expect to have such a harvest. It was said that the Japanese Empire was a small country, poor and pitiful. He thought that coming here would be difficult, but now it seems that this was not the case. It has to be said that the great Ming Empire's people were prejudiced. Under the Confucian education, they seemed to be the only orthodox people in the world, and they were the most powerful. Because of this, they had a sense of superiority, but if they underestimated the great Ming Empire, it was only a matter of time before they suffered a big loss. Back to the topic, Song Yong held the banknotes in his arms and patted his chest in joy as he said to Okabe Uchiyama, General Okabe, you can rest assured. With our Ming Navy here, the 5-star army will not dare to act rashly. They are only the subjects of Bugnam of Gojoseon. How could they dare to become enemies with the Emperor of Ming? Good. With General Song's words, that's great. How about this? Let's drink and eat first. In the words of the Han people, it's a welcoming dinner for everyone. After that, we'll go and rest. Hee. I've arranged a surprise for General Song in the room. As for the 5-star army, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Okabe Uchiyama's eyes were squinted, and he was smiling so much that his eyes almost disappeared. He was expressing his joy. Of course, Song Yong knew what an unexpected surprise was. He had just seen a lot of girls from the Japanese Empire in the crowd. They were all dressed up beautifully, and their eyes were like silk. Their faces were so soft that it seemed like water could be squeezed out of them. There were a lot of girls, and they had already attracted the attention of the Ming Navy soldiers. Okabe Uchiyama had also intentionally mentioned the word beautiful, so how could he not know what it meant? Haha, good, then I will have to trouble General Okabe. General Song is too polite. This is what we should do. You are here to help us. Okabe Uchiyama continued to laugh. Those girls were indeed from the Japanese Empire, but they were different from normal girls from the Japanese Empire. They were the family members of the great generals and the soldiers. Now that the great general was dead, as the family members and relatives, they naturally needed an explanation. In the end, after some consideration, Okabe Uchiyama gathered them together and started a sex business. Chapter 1131. Unlike the women in the brothel, they were only responsible for solving the personal problems of the soldiers. When the matter was reported to Yang Qindong, he hesitated for a while, but in the end, he did not refuse. On the contrary, he gave a name to these women, calling them comfort women. Speaking of which, this was naturally not tolerated by the great Ming dynasty and even the thousands of years of Huaxia's Confucianism. However, when he thought of what happened in Nanjing in his previous life, and how many women in Huaxia were harmed by the Japanese Empire, he could not bear to do it. He took it as an interest. What Yang Qindong did not expect was that when the children of the sinners found out that they did not need to die, and only needed to serve the men, and if they performed well, they could even get money to help the sinners get out of trouble. Most of them did not object, and instead, they were excited that they could do something for their families. This was the nature of servility and lowliness. After hearing about this, Yang Qindong finally did not say anything. Even when the 8th madam found out about this, she did not say anything. First of all, these were the children of the sinners, and it would be unreasonable if they were not punished. Second of all, in the Japanese Empire, men were superior to women. Now that they had a chance to wash away all the shame, this kind of opportunity was hard to come by. Of course, Junko also asked Yang Qindong about this matter. She meant that the daughters of the sinners could do this, but the ordinary people did not need to do this. Otherwise, what would the men of the Japanese Empire do? Yang Qindong, who did not agree to this, quickly satisfied Junko's request. He stipulated that only the daughters of the sinners could enter the comfort women. If there was any coercion, no matter who was involved, no matter what level of authority was involved, they would all be severely punished. In this way, an independent group of women appeared, and the first task they received was to entertain the 50,000 Ming soldiers who came from afar. They wanted to make them happy and satisfied, so that they would put down all their vigilance and work hard for the next plan. Under special arrangements, more and more women from the Japanese Empire were brought to the temporary barracks of the Ming Navy outside the town. Because there were too many wolves and too little meat, it was said that there were some disputes when it was almost night time. Some soldiers even had internal strife and fights because of the lack of women. Of course, this was only a small matter, because in the middle of the night, something even bigger happened. Countless soldiers of the 5-star army suddenly appeared like divine soldiers descending from the heavens. With lightning speed, they took control of the 50,000 Ming Navy soldiers. Many soldiers could not understand this sudden scene. Some of them put on their clothes and picked up their weapons to resist, but they were quickly suppressed. In the face of the 5-star army, who was many times stronger than them in terms of both numbers and combat power, and they were completely unprepared, they couldn't even withstand a single blow. The 50,000 Ming Navy soldiers were all captured, and even the soldiers who stayed on the ships did not have the chance to escape. They were all wiped out by the 5-star army. The last one was Song Yong, who was enjoying the pleasure of a man in the town. When he was sleeping soundly with a woman from the Japanese Empire in each of his arms, the 5-star army suddenly rushed into his room and made him fall from heaven to hell. The naked Song Yong was pulled out of his bed with his but naked. Song Yong didn't wake up until his body touched the ground, and he felt the coldness of the neon soil in February. Then, he shouted, "What are you doing? I am the general of the Ming Navy, and I am here to help you. Are you trying to rebel?" Song Yong's shout was not soft, but no one cared. When he was dragged all the way to the main hall of the room, under the bright lights, he saw Yang Chendong sitting on the main seat. He was wearing a green robe, and his entire body was emitting an oppressive aura. Yang Chendong was not just a name, but a famous person. Although there was no photography at that time, there were many excellent artists. Yang Chendong's appearance had long been spread among the people. Song Yong was a general who commanded 50,000 soldiers, and this time, he was going to make things difficult for the 5-star army. How could he not recognize him? So when he saw Yang Chendong sitting on the main seat, his brain instantly short-circuited. He did not expect Yang Chendong to appear here. For a moment, he reflexively said, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, why are you here? Should be facing the siege of the Japanese army in Ping and Beijing. Humph, ignorant guy. Let me tell you, the Japanese Empire is gone. Before you could even set foot on this land, it had already been conquered by this king." Yang Chendong's voice carried a trace of ridicule. The dignified Ming actually sent such a good-for-nothing general to deal with him. He did not know if he should say that the other party was ignorant or arrogant. Like a bolt from the blue, when these words entered Song Yong's ears, he was so shocked that he could not speak. The powerful Japanese Empire was actually defeated and conquered by the 5-star army. He wanted to say that this was impossible, but when he thought of Yang Chendong's previous actions, it seemed that it was not impossible. Especially now that he was surrounded by the 5-star army's generals and soldiers, and there was no Japanese army around. There were also no sounds of killing. This was enough to prove everything. Song Yong was not a general with a backbone. The only reason he was able to be in his current position was because he was smooth and slick. Now that he knew that the situation was not good for him, the only thing he could think of was to save himself. In front of so many 5-star army's generals, Song Yong knelt on the ground and crawled at Yang Chendong's feet. Under the light, his white but was very dazzling. "Bugnam of Gojoseon, this general was wrong. I should not have come to be your enemy. But all of this was the emperor's will. This general did not dare to disobey. Don't worry, as long as you let me go back, I will definitely not be an enemy of the 5-star army. I am willing to swear." With snot and tears, Song Yong did not have the demeanor of a general at all. But right now, not only did his appearance not make people feel any pity or sympathy, it only made him receive countless disdain. In front of so many generals, if he had some backbone, even if he died, he would still receive everyone's respect. But kneeling and begging for mercy was the most cowardly display. Soldiers were cowardly, while generals were cowardly. It could be imagined that even the general leading the army was like this. It would be strange if they could train qualified and outstanding soldiers. Yang Chendong was also speechless at Song Yong's current appearance. He originally thought that the other party would appear and reprimand him. After all, from a righteous point of view, the other party had received the order of the Emperor of Ming, while he was just a king. He had even planned to talk back to him, but he never thought that the other party would kneel on the ground and beg for mercy. This made him unable to say a lot of the words he had prepared. Of course, Song Yong's fear of death made it much easier for Yang Chendong to carry out the next military plan. First, he rolled his eyes at Song Yong, who was kneeling on the ground. Then, he turned his gaze to Yang Er, who was standing next to him. He then covered Song Yong with a sheet. Although the thin sheet couldn't play an absolute role in this cold weather, it could still cover his face. "I'll leave the rest to you." Yang Chendong suddenly lost interest. A person who was so afraid of death, as long as he didn't take his life, he would not refuse to do anything he wanted him to do. After saying this to Beta Persei, Yang Chendong said to the commander of the 4th Army Division, Ling Daqiang, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tian Hu, and the commander of the new army, Su He, who were waiting at the side. "The three of you, go back and prepare. The army will set off tomorrow morning." Yes, the three generals who had always been arrogant, after hearing Yang Chendong's words, they all respectfully lowered their heads and answered. At the same time, the three of them were also very excited. After such a long time, could they finally compete with the Ming army? After Yang Chendong left, Beta Persei did not leave with him. Instead, he appeared in front of Song Yong, who was kneeling on the ground, with a smile on his face. "General Song, it's time for us to have a good talk, but I don't know if you're willing to cooperate. Don't worry, even if you don't cooperate, I won't kill you. Instead, I'll make you feel worse than death." Although Beta Persei had a smile on his face, Song Yong felt a chill and a sense of danger. He immediately said desperately, "General, please rest assured that I will cooperate. As long as you don't kill me, I'll do anything." A few hours later, when the sky had just brightened, tens of thousands of the 5-star army boarded Ming ships and disappeared. In just one day, the docks in Tosa Prefecture regained its tranquility. If it was someone who did not know, they would not be able to imagine that this place would be so lively yesterday. Shajing City. Tomorrow was the 20th day, which meant that he only had one night to delay. He had to make a decision whether to surrender or fight. Sitting in the study room, the candlelight reflected on his face. He had only been surrounded for a few months, but at this moment, he looked a lot paler than before. Mental exhaustion was the reason for all of this. Originally, he was just a Mongolian general, and he was even the kind of general who was not valued. In the past, even eating and dressing had been a problem. However, everything changed after meeting Yang Chendong. He was put in an important position and was treated better. Especially the trust he had in Yang Chendong made him feel like he was willing to die for his bosom friend. Especially after he became the commander of the new 2nd Army, he was ready to go all out. He wanted to let everyone know that the 6th young master did not misjudge him. He had such strength, and most importantly, he had such loyalty. Chapter 1132. Everything was destroyed as the two cities of Shajing and Jingzhou were besieged. At this moment, the fate of hundreds of thousands of people and tens of thousands of soldiers was in his own hands. Perhaps a wrong decision would cause everyone to lose their lives, or perhaps a wrong decision would allow everyone to continue living. The choice had made Shibi very anxious. He had sent telegrams to Yang Chendong more than once to express his worries. He had also asked him to lead the new 2nd Army to break out of the encirclement. In this way, the hundreds of thousands of people in the two cities might suffer. Under the heavy encirclement, he could not guarantee how many people in the new 2nd Army could escape. But at least he did not lower his head. He lived up to the trust Yang Chendong had in him. However, everything came to an abrupt end with a new telegram from Yang Chendong. It clearly said, "The changes in the situation often catch people off guard. But thinking back to the humiliation of Han Xian and the suffering of the king of Yu, it all proves that temporarily lowering your head and lying low is also a wise move. As for where to go, no matter what decision you make, I believe in you. It was a simple sentence. There was no deliberate guidance or command. It was a sentence that placed all the initiative in his hands. But the more it was like this, the more Shibi felt the weight of the responsibility. He could not make a decision for a long time. Master, outside the door, Division Commander Kong Ji and Guard Captain Wu asked to see you. Just when Shibi was still struggling in his heart and could not make any decision, the voice of the butler sounded outside the door. Kong Ji, the division commander of the 1st Cavalry Division of the new 2nd Army, could be said to be second only to Shibi in the army. In other words, once something happened to Shibi, Kong Ji would be the temporary division commander of the new 2nd Army. This was also what Yang Qindong had said when he established the new 2nd Army. Wu Xiaoyi, Shibi's guard captain, was not only strong, but also loyal. It could be said that he was the last line of defense to ensure Shibi's safety. When something big happened, Shibi would discuss it with him. It could be seen that he was also a very important figure in the new 2nd Army. It was these two people who came together in the night. Even Shibi did not pay attention to them. Please. Soon, the housekeeper brought the two of them into the study. Knowing that there was something important to discuss, the housekeeper took the initiative to leave and close the door. When there were only 3 people left in the room, the atmosphere could not help but become a little tense. Perhaps everyone knew that time was limited, so after a few moments of silence, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division took the initiative to ask, "Commander, tomorrow is the deadline given by Ming. What's your decision?" Shibi didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked, "What do you two think?" At this moment, the atmosphere in the room became tense again. The 3 of them knew that every decision would affect the life and death of hundreds of thousands of people. But no matter how difficult it was, the decision still had to be made. After Division Commander Kong Ji and the guard captain Wu Xiaoyi looked at each other, the former said, "Commander, Shajing City is now surrounded by Ming's army. There is a shortage of food in the city. Even the soldiers have changed from 3 meals a day to 2 meals a day. Their combat strength is going to decline. Under such circumstances, we may have to surrender." As soon as Kong Ji finished speaking, the guard captain Wu Xiaoyi on the side agreed. "That's right. We are too weak. If we fight head-on, we won't have a good ending. So I agree to surrender to Ming." The 2 right-hand men spoke at the same time. After hearing this, Shibi's face became very ugly. She even trembled all over. Obviously, she was very angry. Under such circumstances, Kong Ji didn't seem to see it. He still asked, "Commander, what do you mean?" "What do I mean? Of course I don't agree. So what if we die? At most, we will be a hero again after 18 years. But if we really surrender to Ming, we will be cutting ourselves off from the 5th Star Army and the 6th Young Master. When that time comes, do you think you can live with your conscience? Even if we survive, we will be struggling at death's door. So, I will never surrender. At most, we will fight until both sides suffer. I believe that with a strong defense, even Ming's army won't be able to take advantage of us. Even if we lose in the end, we will take a bite out of them." Shibi said these words with a face full of anger. It was completely different from his usual calmness. He was really angry. He didn't expect that the 2 people he trusted the most would choose to surrender. This was what he couldn't stand. With this angry shout, Kong Ji and Wu Xiaoyi instantly became mute. Obviously, they didn't expect that the usually calm and resourceful commander would act so crazily. However, after a few moments, Kong Ji was the first to react. He also said in a very emotional tone, "Commander, are you really going to choose to fight head-on? Don't you know that if you really do this, it means that hundreds of thousands of people will die? How can you bear to do this?" "Of course I can't bear to do this, but compared to the 6th Young Master's importance, I am more unwilling to betray him, even if it means death." Shibi's voice was resolute and decisive. At this moment, it seemed like Shibi had made the final decision. Shibi was the commander of an army. If he made this decision, then the matter was basically settled. Therefore, these words were the final decision. If nothing unexpected happened, Rong Shao would come to the residence tomorrow and get this result. Kong Ji and Wu Xiaoyi should have been furious when they heard the result. After all, their lives had been lost as well. However, for some reason, not only were they not angry, they even chuckled. Ha ha ha, 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 ha ha ha. Xia Biao had been waiting for the two of them to interrogate him, and had even prepared himself for a big fight when he suddenly heard endless laughter. At this moment, even he didn't know what was going on, so he looked at the two of them. Kong Ji and Wu Xiaoyi stood at attention almost at the same time, then solemnly saluted him. Commander, we are sorry. Just now, we were just testing you. In fact, we have the same thoughts as you. We can't let down the 5-star army, and we can't let down Bugnam of Gojoseon. Shibi saw the two's actions. At this moment, he finally understood what was going on. He couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. To be honest, the two of you really made me angry just now. I thought there was something wrong with my eyes again. Hee, we can't learn from people like Su Yuan. I was personally chosen by the 6th young master. How could I do such a thing? That's right. First, he reprimanded Su Yuan verbally. Then, Kong Ji continued, Commander, your choice and loyalty are admirable and we should learn from you. However, the matter of Shajing City cannot be delayed. We must give you an explanation. What explanation do you need? Of course, we refuse to surrender and prepare to fight. This time, Shibi said without hesitation. No. Unexpectedly, Kong Ji, who just said that they couldn't let down the 5-star army and Bugnam of Gojoseon, changed his mind. Commander, we can't fight. If we fight, our new 2nd army will definitely be defeated. Even the hundreds of thousands of civilians in the 2 cities won't be any better. We can't fight? Then we have to surrender? This time, Shibi was confused by Kong Ji's words. That's right. We can only surrender. Kong Ji's voice was firm as he spoke. As soon as he finished speaking, Wu Xiaoyi, who had been silent for a long time, said, We can only surrender. Commander, this is what we think. For the entire night, the candlelight in the study room never went out. As for what the three of them talked about, even the housekeeper who was in charge of guarding the door didn't know. The sky was finally bright, and those who were supposed to come would come. Just after breakfast, the merchant Rong Xiao, accompanied by the infantry division commander Su Yuan, appeared at the headquarters of the new 2nd Army. Not only them, but there were also hundreds of infantry soldiers who came with them. They were all armed. The appearance of these people was a signal. If Shibi didn't agree to surrender, they would be responsible for protecting Su Yuan and Rong Xiao until they safely left the headquarters of the new 2nd Army. They were even willing to fight among themselves. In the main hall of the headquarters of the new 2nd Army, Shibi sat there quietly. Although it was not late for the entire night, his eyes were still bright and full of spirit. At this moment, he was sitting there and watching everything that happened in the courtyard with an expressionless face. Especially when he saw Su Yuan appear with hundreds of soldiers, he couldn't help but snort coldly. Su Yuan, are you planning to rebel? Under Shibi's leadership for many years, Su Yuan was more or less a little afraid. However, when he saw Rong Xiao beside him and the soldiers behind him, he couldn't help but feel a little more confident. Commander, you know that I won't be your enemy. I'm only doing this to protect myself. Humph, I knew you wouldn't have the guts to do so. Seeing Su Yuan take the initiative to show weakness, Shibi snorted coldly. Then, he looked at Rong Xiao and said, You're here for an answer, right? General, she is wise. You said 20 days will pass, but I wonder what you'll choose. Rong Xiao chuckled and spoke with the attitude of a victor. Sigh. After letting out a long sigh, Shibi did not immediately answer. Instead, he first raised his head to look at the sky before standing up with a sad expression. He walked into his courtyard and knelt on the ground under everyone's gazes. He was kneeling in the direction of the beginning city. 6th young master, I've let you down. If you want to be angry, you can just kill or torture me. I'm doing this for the sake of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and citizens. Chapter 11:33. Rong Xiao, who was watching from the side, couldn't help showing a hint of fondness in his eyes. He seemed to have thought of the result that the other party was going to give. It seemed that Shibi had made the decision to surrender. If so, he could take down Shajing and Jingzhou without shedding any blood. As the executor, he would make a great contribution. At that time, his future would be limitless. As Rongshao expected, after a while, Shibi stood up and made the decision to surrender to Bai Ming, but he still put forward two conditions. First, everything he had now was given by Bugnam of Gojoseon, so he would never be his enemy. He could help Bai Ming deal with other enemies, except for Yang Xie and the 5-star army. Second, no one could hurt the 100,000 people in Shajing and Jingzhou, even if they did something extreme. As long as they didn't rebel against Bai Ming, no one could be caught, let alone killed. If Bai Ming could agree to the two conditions, as the commander of the new Second Army, Shibi could draft a letter of surrender to Bai Ming and announce it to the world. Shibi finally made a decision, and it was a decision that satisfied him. Rongshao was already very happy, so he nodded and agreed. General Shibi's two conditions. I agree on behalf of Bai Ming. Please write the letter to the world now. There's no hurry. Let's talk about it after you write down the two conditions. To be honest, I don't trust you. She looked at Rongshao with some disdain. Her eyes were extremely cold. Well said, well said. But before that, shouldn't General Shibi express something first? After all, I can't completely trust you. Rongshao rolled his eyes, suppressing the anger in his heart from being looked down upon, and said thoughtfully, Yes, but how should I express it? Shibi asked back. This. Rongshao first glanced at Su Yuan beside him, then said thoughtfully, Why don't you give the order to completely hand over the safety of Shajing City to General Su? This way, you can show your sincerity. Although Su Yuan was still the commander of the new Second Army's infantry division, it seemed that he had already surrendered to Bai Ming. With him in charge of the city's safety, Rongshao and Bai Ming would be relieved. Shibi naturally knew this, so after pondering for a moment, he nodded and agreed. Okay, I agree. Haha, good. Rongshao couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. Once Su Yuan was in charge of the city's defense, it would be difficult for Shibi to go back on his word. At the very least, if they really fought, Su Yuan would only need to open the city gates and Bai Ming's army would be able to rush in. At that time, with the advantage of more than 10 times their military strength, victory would definitely belong to them. Forced, Shibi finally made the decision to surrender. Although this was betraying Yang Qindong, it also saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians. When the news first spread out from the city, when it came from the mouth of Infantry Division Commander Su Yuan, many of the soldiers and commoners in the city who heard this news all shed tears. Most of them joined Yang Xie's big family later, but even so, they still enjoyed many benefits. They originally thought that their lives would change greatly and become better and better, but the sudden appearance of Bai Ming's army shattered all their fantasies. Now, they had returned to Bai Ming and became Bai Ming's people. It was impossible to say that they didn't have any thoughts in their hearts. However, the situation was like this. Facing Bai Ming's army that was like a wolf and a tiger, what could they do? Were they really going to risk their lives? If that was the case, no one would be able to survive. Rongshao acted very quickly. In just 5 days, he received a letter of guarantee written by Bai Ming's commander, Shi Hong, agreeing to give up the two requirements. Shibi didn't act shamelessly after that. He took out the document that he had written long ago. It stated that the two cities, Shajing and Jingzhou, would belong to Bai Ming from now on. They would leave the embrace of Yang Xie, which was also Bugnam of Gojoseon. After receiving the document, Rongshao quickly announced it to the world and spread it widely. First city. In Yang Xie City, which was the closest city to Shajing City, the army commander, Tiger's Mane, immediately called for a military meeting when he saw the document written by Shibi. They reached a very unified goal, which was to absolutely not let this happen. They had to leave Shajing City and give it to the new Second Army. No. Now, it should be said that the Bai Ming army was powerful and let them know that betraying Bugnam of Gojoseon would definitely not end well. The one who led the troops was Ma Xiangshan, the commander of the new First Army's Light Cavalry Regiment. As a light cavalry regiment, their advantage was that they were fast enough. They could be described as coming and going like the wind. With such an advantage, even if they encountered danger, they had a great chance to escape. Unfortunately, they went out with a face of anger. However, not long after they left the first city, they met Fang Dingshan, who had been waiting here for a long time. Fang Dingshan led the Liaodong Iron Cavalry, which had expanded to 70,000 people, and set up a formation. It was as if as long as they rushed over, they would kill all of them. Although Ma Xiangshan was very angry, considering the comparison of the forces of both sides and the fact that the Liaodong Iron Cavalry was also an elite cavalry force, in the end, his rationality prevailed over the anger in his heart. He had to order the army to retreat and return to the first city behind him. Without the external force, Shajing City and Jingzhou City fell into the hands of the Biming army as they wished. In order to achieve the goal of completely controlling these two cities, the Biming commander Shi Hong, who was now in charge of the security of this area, ordered more than 100,000 Biming army to enter the two cities. In addition, Su Yuan's infantry division was firmly on the side of Biming. At this moment, the advantage of the military strength fell into the hands of Biming. After the fall of the two cities, especially after the 100,000 Biming army entered, they were not people who followed the rules. Gradually, there were some incidents of burning and looting. Perhaps it was because their military pay was too low, and there were many good things in the two cities. Under the greed, there were many open robberies. In just a single day's time, more than 10 shops were robbed, over 100 women were taken, and several dozen commoners were killed on the streets. Because of this, he was extremely unhappy. He wrote a letter to Commander Shi Hong, expressing the resentment in his heart. Unfortunately, even if Shi Hong personally stepped in, he could only control the situation from worsening. As for the Biming soldiers who robbed and killed before, none of them were punished. Obviously, Biming had used a compromise. They did not want to anger Shibi and cause a mutiny among the 3 cavalry divisions of the new Second Army, but they also did not want to hurt the morale of their own soldiers. Naturally, Shibi was not happy about this. However, he did not expect that his guard captain, Wu Xiaoyi, would actually ride out of the manor alone in a fit of anger. He charged into the northern Ming military camp in broad daylight and found a few criminals. The northern Ming soldiers who had killed the commoners did not say a word and killed them with a saber. Wu Xiaoyi's actions naturally attracted the anger of the other Biming soldiers. After being surrounded, he was finally captured alive. Then, the matter was reported to Shibi. Shibi was still living in the city lord's mansion and did not seem to have been stripped of any power. However, when Rong Xiao and Su Yuan appeared here again, their expressions were clearly much more arrogant than before. In the past, they had come to ask for help. However, this time, they came to denounce them, so their aura was naturally different. In the hall, Rong Xiao questioned Shibi. He said that because of guard captain Wu Xiaoyi, 4 Biming soldiers had died. This matter had caused the army to be extremely dissatisfied, and an explanation had to be given. Explanation? What explanation? You promised me before that you would not harm the people in the city. What did you do? Guard Captain Wu only acted out of indignation. You can say that he was willing to do so. Shibi naturally would not allow the other party to criticize him and took the initiative to counterattack. Even if you are dissatisfied, you can't just casually charge into the army camp and kill people. If you don't follow the rules, how can we explain this to the soldiers? Therefore, Wu Xiaoyi must die. Of course, we were also in the wrong before. How about this? General Shibi will personally deal with Wu Xiaoyi. This can be considered as us giving you face. Furthermore, we can guarantee that no one will harass the people in the city in the future. Rong Xiao had already thought of what to say. At this moment, he appeared to be awe-inspiring and righteous. However, they did not kill Wu Xiaoyi and instead handed him over to Shibi for him to kill. This action was truly too sinister. Hearing this, Shibi's eyes flashed with uncontrollable anger. Just as he was about to say something, Rong Xiao spoke again. General Shi, don't forget that we agreed before. If someone rebels, then we have the authority to deal with them. Your guard captain actually charged into our Biming army to kill people. Isn't that no different from a rebellion? Of course, if you can't be ruthless enough to deal with him, then you can hand him over to our army. However, I'm afraid that if we do that, Wu Xiaoyi will suffer even more. Haha. This was a threat. However, Shibi could not say anything. Who told Wu Xiaoyi to be so impulsive? In order to prevent the people in the city from being bullied, and for the security of the two cities to return to peace, Shibi had no choice but to agree. Tears flowed from the corners of her eyes as she said, "All right, we'll do as you say." Haha, very good. Shibi finally compromised. All of this fell into Rong Xiao's eyes and made him very happy. He believed that once the news of Wu Xiaoyi being killed by Shibi spread, this new Second Army commander's authority would be suppressed to the lowest level. At that time, even if he had any disloyalty, he would not be able to stir up any waves. Not long after Rong Xiao left, Wu Xiaoyi was sent to the city lord's manor. Following him was the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Kong Ji. He knelt on the ground and pleaded with the other guards, namely Shibi's personal guards. Chapter 1134. Although Shibi couldn't bear all of this, he still issued the order to execute Wu Xiaoyi in the end. The execution was carried out in the courtyard of the city lord's mansion. Present were Shibi, Kong Ji, a group of personal guards, and several supervisors sent by the Ming army. Shibi's eyes were filled with tears, and he shouted the word "kill" in pain. After laughing, Wu Xiaoyi's head fell to the ground. When the news spread out, the whole city was in an uproar. Everyone felt that there was no hope for the future. Because of this matter, Shibi also developed a grudge with Kong Ji and the other 2 cavalry division commanders. It was said that even if it was his order, the 3 division commanders began to resist. Rong Xiao heard this news in the mansion in the city. Of course, he was very satisfied. He believed that it wouldn't be long before there was internal strife among Shibi and the others. That would be the time to deal with these high-level figures. At that time, it would be the time for them to send people to seize the military power. Sha Jing and Jingzhou seemed to have calmed down. As time passed, when the morale of the army and the people's hearts were slack, they would completely belong to Ming. And for all of this, the 5-star army didn't seem to do anything, especially the first city. It seemed that they couldn't even protect themselves because after dealing with Sha Jing and Jingzhou, hundreds of thousands of Ming troops began to surround the first city. An even bigger storm seemed to be about to begin. The new Ergondusi area had now been renamed Liaodong by Zhu Qiyu. In the sea town of the Twin City Guard, which was the town that Yang Qindong first came to when he attacked the grassland, it was very lively at the moment. Countless 5-star army came ashore from here. They disguised themselves as Ming sea soldiers and entered the town with lightning speed. When the 200 Ming soldiers guarding the town realized that something was wrong, they were already on the chopping block. The army that appeared here was the 5-star army led by Yang Qindong. Moreover, it was the main force of the army. For example, the army that came along this time was the 4th Army Division, the 1st Cavalry Division, and the New Army. In addition, there were also 30,000 C-ranked soldiers transferred from Korea. The 3 divisions of the 4th Army Division had been deployed from the war against the Japanese Empire, and they were only the first batch. Following closely behind them were even more troops that had retreated from the battlefield of the Japanese Empire. As the vanguard troops, these 3 troops became Yang Qindong's fist forces. Their mission was to open a new passage here that led to the origin city from the outside world. In the past, Liaodong region was part of Ming's territory. Even if Yang Qindong had any ideas, he would have suppressed them because of the general situation. But now, they had already targeted the new Second Army. What was there to hesitate about? It was impolite not to reciprocate. Yang Qindong was not a person who would not retaliate. Compared to other people, he was originally a vengeful person. It was just that many times, the time was not ripe, and some of his ideas had not been formed yet. Looking at Ming now, Korea and the Japanese Empire had been included in Yang Xie's territory. At this time, Yang Qindong did not have so many concerns. Not to mention, this time, Ming had provoked him first. Even if he fought back, it could be considered that he had a legitimate reason. Seatown became Yang Qindong's first gate when he entered this place. It had to be said that northern Ming was also filled with talents. Furthermore, this place was very close to the coast. It wasn't that no one had considered the possibility of the 5-star army suddenly making a move. Although the probability of this happening was too small in many people's eyes, the nearby city guards still arranged for 200 people to be stationed here. They also prepared enough beacon towers to ensure that if there was an emergency, they would be able to warn the other cities and city guards in advance, giving them enough time to prepare. But obviously, they had miscalculated again. With regards to the situation here, the Yang faction's intelligence department had already investigated thoroughly. They captured Song Yong alive and detained all of the Northern Bright Sea Division so that they could send their army here without attracting any attention. Now it seemed that this first step was right. At least, the Ming army outside Seatown had not discovered them yet. Young master, what should we do next? Beta Persei stood beside Yang Chendong with his hand, holding the hilt of his sword. There was some excitement on his face. Previously, when they were in the Japanese Empire, they had heard that Ming had attacked the grassland and surrounded the two cities of Shajing and Jingzhou. It was only because the Japanese Empire's war at that time that they really did not have the spare energy to take care of this place that the Ming army had been arrogant for a few days. Now that the war in the Japanese Empire had finally ended, it was naturally time for them to take revenge. It could be said that Yang Er and the other warriors were filled with anger when they came here. Their first opponent was only around 200 people, and they had come here in the form of a surprise attack. This number of enemies was really not enough to fight, not enough to look at. Hearing Beta Persei's question, Division Commander Ling Daqiang, Division Commander Tian Hu, and Commander Su He all looked at Yang Chendong with shining eyes. Yang Chendong, who had already changed into a black armor, was now riding on the white dragon, looking into the distance thoughtfully. This was not the first time he had appeared in Seatown, but compared to before, the pressure on him this time was obviously greater. It was not for anything else, but because his opponent this time was Ming, the so-called orthodox in the eyes of the world. Even if the great Ming dynasty was divided into two, Ming's power could not be underestimated. The intelligence department showed that the other side had an army of more than 4 million soldiers, and this was not enough. They were still expanding, and this number alone was not easy to deal with. Not to mention, Yang Chendong still had so many family members and businesses in the capital of Ming. Perhaps if his business was gone, he could start again. If his money was gone, he could earn it again. But if his family members were gone, then it would be too late for Yang Chendong to regret. Fortunately, Ming did not seem to have any intention of falling out with Yang Chendong. At least from the intelligence department's information, his family members were not targeted by Ming, and even his business was still running. Thinking about it, Yang Chendong was not only Ming's enemy, but also the enemy of the southern Ming dynasty and the kingdom of Warziesin. Moreover, he was so powerful that Ming had to go all out to fight with him. If both sides suffered heavy losses, even if they won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. At that time, it would only give their opponent an opportunity. This was also the reason why Ming did not want to fall out with Yang Chendong. They only wanted to eliminate Yang Xie's forces around them and then vigorously develop themselves. But even if it was this request, Yang Chendong would not easily agree. The grasslands were not Ming's sphere of influence to begin with. Everything in the first city was obtained by Yang Chendong and his brothers step by step. Why? Seeing that the meat was fat enough, now you want to kill it to satisfy your cravings. How could there be such a good thing in the world? From the moment he appeared here, Yang Chendong was already prepared to fall out with Ming. The only difference was to what extent he would fall out with them in the end. Now that Beta Persei asked, he naturally would not be polite. He nodded lightly and said, "The next step is naturally to fight. Since someone has snatched 2 of our cities and dealt with 1 of our armies, then we will return the favor tenfold. Men, bring me the map." As soon as he finished speaking, Longwei quickly sent the map to Yang Chendong. Then, he pointed to the Shuangqing guards closest to Seatown and said, "Commander Ling, take your 4th Division and set off from here. First, capture this city. Remember, it's best if you don't hurt anyone. Then, follow me to the Terran area." "Yes." The commander of the 4th Division, Ling Daqiang, immediately stood at attention and said with a happy expression, "This was equivalent to the first battle, and this was handed over to Long Feng. This was enough to prove the 6th young master's trust in them." Yang Chendong pointed to many places on the map one after another, then looked at Su He and asked in a deep voice, "Commander Su, from Shuangqing Guards to the west, the Ajulan Guards, the Tuna Guards, the Fuyu Guards, the Duoyin Guards, all the way to the Wonan River Guards, as well as a large area in the north. I'll leave it all to you." Do you have the confidence to take them down one by one? Sui's face was solemn, but his expression showed that he was extremely excited. He immediately stood at attention and said, "Please rest assured, Bugnam of Gojoseon. Our new army promises to complete the mission." Very good. Yang Chenong nodded in satisfaction. Finally, his gaze fell on Tianhu and said, "With all the targets of the new army as a front line, this will be your defense area. In short, no reinforcements from Ming are allowed to set foot here. If one appears, you will defeat it. Do you have a problem?" "No problem," Tianhu promised. As the number 1 cavalry unit, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, their mobility had always been the strongest. They were the most suitable to intercept reinforcements. The 3 capable generals had divided the work. The moment Yang Chendong ordered people to put away the map, he looked forward with bright eyes and said, "Very good. Since that's the case, everyone go and prepare. We will set off in 4 hours. Do not slack off." With the order, Yang Chendong's first initiative to mobilize troops against Ming officially began. This also meant that Yang Chendong had enough confidence to compete with Ming for the world. After the end of the naval battle, the land battle officially began. Shuangqing guards Qianhu Hiying. He was currently resting in his mansion in Shuangqing. He didn't feel that the war had begun and that he was in danger. This couldn't be blamed on him. Since Ming began to vigorously develop their military, the status of the soldiers had increased a lot. Especially with the establishment of the Liaodong cavalry, many of the troublemakers in this area were recruited. Without those troublemakers causing trouble, King felt that the security was a lot better. Therefore, during this period of time, he was very comfortable as a Qianhu. After dinner, he would hug his new concubine and sleep soundly in the room. It was really a happy thing in the world. It was wonderful. Chapter 11:35. But as the saying goes, when a person sits at home, misfortune will come from the heavens. The sky had completely darkened, and the twin city guards, which was not very large, had also sunk into a state of silence. However, outside the He mansion, there was a series of urgent knocks on the door, causing many people in the mansion to be awakened. No matter what, King was still a general, so he was still somewhat vigilant. The knocks on the door also woke him up, but the long period of peace did not make him think too much. Instead, he could not help but shout outside, "What's going on? Who's knocking on the door? Why aren't you going to take a look?" Without needing He Ying's orders, the door was already opened. Following that, a military commander rushed into the residence and quickly arrived at He Ying's door. With an urgent voice, he said, "Sir, there's someone knocking on the city gates. The person claims to be Navy General Song Yong. Our brothers are not sure. Please make a decision." "Song Yong?" A cry of surprise came from within the room. King had naturally heard of this newly promoted Navy general before. Not only that, he had even seen this person before. But because the difference in status between the two of them was too great, they did not have a deep relationship. Song Yong was here. This made Hing feel a little confused. No matter what, the other party was a Navy general with 50,000 soldiers. He was just a small Qianhu with 1,120 soldiers. The two of them were on the same level. Why would the other party come to his small twin city guards? His heart was filled with confusion, but He Ying did not dare to delay. He hurriedly put on his clothes and walked out of the room. When he saw the commander who came to report, he could not help but ask suspiciously, "Is it really General Song who came? Did you see clearly?" "This, sir, we are of lowly status. How could we know such a big figure like General Song? We are really not sure. That's why we asked sir to make a decision," the commander said with a troubled expression. King thought that his words made sense and nodded. Then, he arrogantly raised his head and walked towards the gates of the residence. As he walked, he said, "That's right, with your status, you naturally do not know General Song, but I do. Come, follow me to take a look." Under the admiring gaze of the Zhengqi, He Ying left the manor and arrived at the South City Gate under the protection of several bodyguards. At this moment, more than 100 Ming soldiers had gathered here. They were all in charge of guarding the place. When they heard that a naval general had arrived, they gathered around out of curiosity. After seeing the arrival of the Qianhu, everyone moved aside. allowing He Ying to smoothly walk up to the top of the tower. Then, with the help of the torches downstairs, who else could it be but Song Yong on a horse downstairs? Seeing that it was really Song Yong, He Ying was very surprised. General Song, didn't you lead the navy to attack the Japanese Empire? Why would he suddenly appear here? Who are you? Song Yong, who was riding on his horse, asked when he heard someone call out to him. General Song, I am the Qianhu of the Twin City Guards, He Ying. Since there was such an opportunity, He Ying naturally wanted to introduce himself. He Ying wanted to establish a good relationship, but Song Yong was impatient and shouted, So it's Qianhu He. But since you know this general, why don't you open the gates? Are you going to refuse to let Shangguan through the gates? Instead of answering directly, he scolded. Unfortunately, there were people who fell for this trick. For example, He Ying was such a person. When he heard Song Yong scolding him, he quickly apologized and said to the soldiers beside him, What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and open the gates. Naturally, no one dared to disobey He Ying's orders. Soon, there was the sound of the gates being opened. Then, there was the sound of horse hooves, and more black figures entered through the gates. At this moment, He Ying had already descended from the tower and was ready to welcome General Song Yong. However, when he descended from the tower, he was greeted with countless guns and arrows. Needless to say, this was the work of the soldiers of the 4th Infantry Division. With someone like Song Yong leading the way, the Twin City Guards did not even need to fire a single shot. Logically speaking, Yang Chendong could have chosen to launch a night attack. With the soldiers of the 4th Infantry Division, climbing up the walls of the Twin City Guards was not a problem. It was just that he didn't want to make a move on the Han people, and he also needed to preserve the 2 city guards. Because this place would become the Yang faction's logistics base for a period of time. A lot of money and food sent from the sea would be temporarily stored here, so in the end, he chose to let Song Yong stand out and make a contribution. He Ying was just a small Qianhu. According to the intelligence department, this person bullied the common people all year round and was not a good person. Yang Chendong did not even have the intention to meet him and directly handed him over to the 4th Infantry Division's Ling Daqiang. He has lived here for a long time. He must be very familiar with the situation in Liaodong. Open his mouth and let him know something beneficial to us. Don't worry, 6th young master. A smile flashed across Ling Daqiang's face. After agreeing, he turned around and left. Pass down the order. No soldiers are to disturb the people. At the same time, put up a notice saying that I, Bugnam of Gojoseon, have come. As long as the people here cooperate with us, they can receive money at any time. You can go and do this. Yang Chendong looked at Beta Persei, who was following beside him, and assigned tasks. Young master, please don't do that. After following Yang Chendong for a long time, Beta Persei knew his young master's feelings for the Han people. He also worked as a logistics division commander for a period of time. Beta Persei was naturally familiar with this small matter. Thus, half an hour later, there were many notices on the walls of the Shuangcheng Guard Central City. A large number of people who were originally in a state of panic gathered to watch. Some literate scholars read the notices, and the other people knew that the one who came was King Wunan of Damyang. The reason why they wanted to occupy this place was because when Bugnam of Gojoseon made a move against the Japanese Empire, his rear, the grassland, was attacked by Ming. Now that the Japanese Empire was dealt with and became a province of the 5-star army, Bugnam of Gojoseon appeared in Liaodong. This time, he came to give those who wanted to deal with him a look. The notice also emphasized that they only wanted to deal with those who opposed them. As for the ordinary people, they would not offend them in the slightest. Once a soldier violated the rules, the people could go to the yamen at any time to report it. Once it was verified, not only would it be dealt with, the person who reported it would also be given a certain amount of silver as a reward. At the end of the notice, it was written, Next, the 5-star army will send a large number of military supplies here. They will be transported in all directions from the Shuangcheng Guard Central City. A lot of labor will be needed. As long as the people are willing to participate, they will be distributed according to their labor. Based on preliminary calculations, a strong man could earn 1 tael of silver after working hard for a day. Even a capable woman could earn half a tael of silver. The notice that was posted quickly attracted a lot of discussion among the people. This was also Yang Qindong's request. He did not want to deceive the people. He wanted them to know what was going on outside and let them participate. This would give rise to a sense of ownership, and in the future, it would be twice the result with half the effort. The notice was written clearly enough, and as expected, it attracted all kinds of discussion among the people. So it was Bugnam of Gojoseon who came. I heard that he loves the people very much, especially us Han people. It seems that there is no need to worry. Yes, Bugnam of Gojoseon treats the people well. With him around, of course we are safe. But it says that Ming is attacking Bugnam of Gojoseon's forces in the grasslands? What does this mean? Isn't Bugnam of Gojoseon our great Ming dynasty's Bugnam of Gojoseon? An honest-looking man in his 40s scratched his head as he spoke with a confused look on his face. In fact, it was not only this middle-aged man. Many people had the same expression. They lived in the Shuangchengard central city all year round, and because the transportation was not developed, they did not know much about what was going on outside. Fortunately, there were some knowledgeable people in the crowd. They had traveled extensively, so they knew a bit more. Facing this question, they gave an explanation. What do you know? Some of the territories in the grasslands did not originally belong to our great Ming dynasty. That was the world of the Mongol cavalry. Their horses are like the wind, and their people are like ghosts. Wherever they go, they eat people without spitting out their bones. They are still nomads, and other than raising some livestock, they don't know how to do anything else. They don't even have any iron tools. In order to survive, they have set their sights on us, the Han people. They would often rob the Han people stationed there. Other than robbing things, sometimes they would even rob people. That is very abominable. This brother is right. Those Mongol cavalry are very vicious, especially in the recent years. Our great Ming dynasty has allowed them to do whatever they want, causing them to not know how to restrain themselves. Their actions have become even more vicious. I was also fortunate enough to go to the grasslands. I heard that it was because of the appearance of Bugnam of Gojoseon that those Mongol cavalry were defeated. Many grassland tribes were cleaned up because of this, and some were even destroyed. Yes, I went to the Jianzhou Left Guard Central City a while ago. I heard from a friend there that there is a very magnificent city in the grasslands. There are countless Han people there, and they live very comfortably. That was built by Bugnam of Gojoseon. That friend also said that since Bugnam of Gojoseon was in the grasslands, the safety of the Han people was guaranteed. Who knows how many people there have worshipped Bugnam of Gojoseon in their homes, saying that they are thanking him. The few people spoke one after another and quickly told the story to everyone. Most of the Han people who did not know all of this before now knew that Bugnam of Gojoseon was actually so powerful. However, a problem appeared. An old scholar who was literate but had never traveled far asked with a puzzled expression, since Bugnam of Gojoseon is so powerful in the grasslands and has done so many things for our Han people, why is the Ming imperial court looking for trouble with him? Chapter 1136. Seeing that it was the old scholar who spoke, someone at the side laughed. As expected of a scholar. Don't tell me you think that everyone in the world is a good person, just because the books are all good people. Don't you know the phrase, a great achievement alters the emperor? That's right. Bugnam of Gojoseon is so powerful and powerful. How could he not alert the emperor? It's normal for him to take action to suppress them. Haven't all emperors been the same since ancient times? It's a pity that they chose Bugnam of Gojoseon to fight against the Japanese Empire. That's not right. No matter what, Bugnam of Gojoseon took care of the Japanese Empire for the good of the people. Shuangcheng wasn't very far from the sea. They were lucky enough to see the appearance of the Japanese bandits a few times. Although the Japanese didn't dare to really attack Ming with their military strength at that time, they could still attack the periphery. After all, their navy was stronger than Ming. It could be said that many of the people of Shuangcheng had suffered losses at the hands of the pirates. Now that they heard that Bugnam of Gojoseon had completely taken care of them, how could they not be happy? Discussions rose and fell like this. Some things that they did not know before were explained by everyone. Most of the people now understood. They also knew that Bugnam of Gojoseon sent out his troops because he was bullied. Furthermore, Bugnam of Gojoseon treated the Han people very well. After a round of discussion, they finally came to a conclusion. First, there was no need to panic. As long as they did not do anything extreme, Bugnam of Gojoseon would not do anything to them. Second, Bugnam of Gojoseon was in urgent need of labor. If anyone had the idea, they could give it a try. Even if they did not get paid in the end, they would only have wasted a day's effort. It was not a big loss. The people did not necessarily know right from wrong. Their knowledge was limited, and they did not care as much about the ownership of the imperial power as those who benefited from it. Just like what the commoners often said, no matter who became the emperor, they would still be them. There would not be any changes. Not to mention a border city like the Twin Cities Guard. It was impossible for the emperor to come here in his lifetime. He had never even seen it. So how could he talk about feelings? What the commoners really cared about was the benefits that they could obtain. Since the 5-star Army's notice said that as long as they worked for them, they would be able to receive money and the remuneration was so high, why not give it a try? Some of the commoners thought so, but others shook their heads and walked away. Since ancient times, it was impossible to take advantage of the royal family while working for them. Not to mention 1 tael of silver a day. Even if it was 2 maces of silver a day, it would still be impossible. Would those officials and soldiers be so kind? Slowly, the crowd dispersed. Most of them were returning home, and only a few of them were heading towards the barracks. All of this fell into the eyes of Longwei, who was observing everything from afar. When Longwei saw it, the matter naturally reached Yang Qindong's ears, and he laughed heartily in response. Good, it's done. As long as one commoner is willing to try, there won't be any problems. Shang Yang's reform had gained the trust of the commoners by standing on a tree as a sign. Now, without standing on a tree as a sign, the commoners were willing to give it a try. How could it not work? Once they returned home with the silver, presumably the city would explode. Considering that the Twin Cities Guard was too small, Yang Qindong did not arrange for people to guide public opinion. If a stranger suddenly appeared, not only would their words not be believed, but it would also arouse everyone's vigilance. As a result, he let things develop naturally. Even if no one believed what the notice said, he would still use the method of standing on a tree as a sign to gain everyone's trust. Now, it seemed that there were still some daring people who were willing to try. There was no reason for the matter to not work. This was also the reason why Yang Qindong had set the rewards so high. It must be known that in a place like the Twin Cities Guard, 1 tael of silver could do a lot of things. Striking while the iron was hot, and letting the commoners drink with the golden and silver cups, Yang Qindong said to Longwei Badaojiang, pass down the order. The soldiers who don't need to be trained will enter the homes of the commoners in the city and chop firewood and water for them. If they can do anything, inform Beta Persei to get some food for them. It was now the 3rd month of spring. In the south, it was already spring and flowers were blooming, but in the north, especially in the Liaodong region, the weather was still very cold. At night, it was common for the temperature to be 10 degrees below zero. From time to time, there would be heavy snow, as if to tell the commoners that winter was not completely over. For example, at noon today, it snowed. Although it was not very heavy, the streets and the courtyards of the commoners' homes were still covered with a layer of white. This gave the 5-star Army a chance to show off. For a time, their figures were everywhere in the city. In the commoners' courtyards, the snow on the streets of the city was quickly swept away, revealing the originally black ground. At night, the commoners who had worked hard for most of the day walked out of the barracks with smiles on their faces. They did not show the slightest bit of exhaustion from working hard for the day. After working for most of the day, many of them had less than 1 tael of silver in their hands. This was because they did not work for a day. If they went early in the morning, they would definitely be able to earn 1 tael of silver. More importantly, working in the barracks, they were even provided with lunch. Although it was not very nutritious, just being able to fill their stomachs was enough. This already made them very satisfied. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was like New Year's. These commoners who had received benefits had already decided that they would go to the barracks to work tomorrow morning. Not only that, they would also call their friends to go with them. Everyone should earn money together. Just like this, when these people returned home, the city became lively again. When the white tails of silver were placed in front of everyone, their previous disbelief was swept away. Some people even regretted that they did not give it a try today. Of course, most of them had already decided that they would go to the barracks tomorrow morning. Not to mention 1 tael of silver a day. Even half a tael a day was an extremely good thing. Since ancient times, there had been many ways to buy people's hearts, but there were not many that were as simple and straightforward as Yang Qindong's. History had already proven that as long as you were good to the commoners, they would recognize you. It was not impossible for them to even work for you. Just like now, the soldiers worked for the commoners, and the commoners worked for the barracks. In turn, they also received money. Who would object? The twin city guards, who had originally been somewhat nervous because of the city being occupied, quickly calmed down. Not only did they restore their previous order, but everyone was still beaming with joy. They were not affected at all by the fact that winter had not yet left and the weather was still cold. Their smiles seemed to be able to melt the snow. Taking down the Twin City Guards was only the first step in Yang Qindong's military operation to occupy the entire Liaodong region. Next, his gaze fell on the Yima River Guards in the northeast. It was still the same. Song Yong took the lead and came at night. As long as the city gate was opened, everything would be much simpler. All of this was thanks to the great Ming's official hierarchy. In front of a superior, a lower official generally did not have any authority to speak. As the commander of 50,000 naval troops, Song Yong's position in the military was not low. At least in the entire Liaodong region, there were very few people who could be higher than him. With him going out to open the city gate, it was always successful. The army was at the front, followed by 30,000 North Korean soldiers. Behind them, the commoners of Twin City drove carriages and were responsible for logistics. This reduced the pressure on the army, allowing them to fight forward wholeheartedly. They did not have to think about other things at all. Naturally, they were able to do things with twice the result with half the effort. Yang Qindong's plan went very smoothly. The new army, Su He, did not hold them back. As soon as they appeared, they quickly took down the defenseless Audiobook guards and Tun guards. Then, they went straight for the Fuyu guards. There was no such thing as an airtight pants. Although the new army's movements were very fast, because of the heavy snow, the warhorses could not display their usual strength. In the end, a portion of the enemy managed to escape. Then, the news spread. The nearby guards finally knew that the 5-star army had appeared in the Liaodong region. When the commander of the Jianzhou Left Guards, Chendula, received the news that the 5-star army had appeared in the Liaodong region, he turned pale with fright. This was a sudden situation that he did not expect at all. He ordered people to ask for help from the Beiming imperial court while he began to prepare his troops for war. The former Jianzhou Left Guards had been taught a good lesson by Yang Qindong. The former commander Liang Xian and the former commander Tang Longtian had both died at the hands of the 5-star army. Naturally, he, who had suffered a loss before, was cautious and prepared for battle. He knew the valiant fighting strength of the 5-star army and had seen it more than once. Chen Dula still had lingering fear in his heart. He was even considering whether or not it was better to directly defend the city. However, the newly appointed commander Tong Long did not think this way. Just by hearing his name, Tong Long knew that he was not a Han person. Instead, he was a combination of the Nuzan clan and Han people. Because of his bloodline, he had shown that he was good at fighting since he was young. After he grew up, he worked hard to perform well. In addition to his family's support, he finally obtained the position of Commander Tong Long. This was a secondary grade 3 military official. Furthermore, Tong Long was still young, not even 30 years old. It could be said that his future was limitless. However, the bad thing was that the position of an official in the Great Ming dynasty depended on seniority. So what if you were capable? Being young was your biggest weakness. Unless you could make a great contribution, you would have to wait if you wanted to be promoted. Some people could even wait for a few years, a decade, or a lifetime. Of course, the young Tong Long did not want to wait any longer. He urgently needed to prove himself. Originally, he was thinking about whether or not he should sign up for the Liaodong Iron Cavalry. After all, that army was now unhindered in the grassland. It was said that even the powerful 5-star army was suppressed in the first city and did not dare to move. An army like this was the place where hot-blooded soldiers like him could realize their ambitions. However, before he could make any decision, the five-star army actually appeared in the Liaodong region. Chapter 11:37. According to the official information, the five-star army should be at war with the Japanese Empire right now. Why would they appear here? It was a little puzzling. However, Tong Long didn't care that much. He only knew that his opportunity to perform had arrived. After receiving the news, Tong Long first went to look for Commander Chandula and took the initiative to ask for a battle. Unfortunately, he was directly rejected. The reason given by Chandula was that it wasn't the right time to send troops because they couldn't figure out the actual situation of the five-star army. Tong Long walked out of Chandula's mansion with an unhappy expression and went home angrily. The Tong family's status in the Nuzan tribe was very high. In a place like the Jianzhou Left Guard, there was basically nothing that they couldn't do once they wanted to do something. Tong Long used the reason that Chandula wanted to suppress him and didn't want him to be promoted as an excuse to ask his family to step forward and put pressure on him. The commander didn't know about this. He was still looking at the map in his study room and worrying. Honestly speaking, Chandula really didn't have the intention to suppress Tong Long. Stopping him from sending troops was really for Tong Long's sake. He had dealt with the five-star army before and knew how powerful they were. He still remembered how overbearing the five-star army was when they wanted to open up a transportation route from here. The army was waiting outside for the nearby guards to attack, but no matter who went, didn't they not gain the slightest advantage? Such a powerful opponent wasn't someone that could be easily defeated. Without absolute confidence, it was best to bide one's time and preserve one's strength. The kind-hearted Chandula wanted to preserve his strength. However, the Tong family's strength was really too great. In the afternoon, the influential people in the city came one after another to put pressure on him. These people had a certain amount of prestige in the city. If it was only one or two of them, he wouldn't be afraid. However, with so many of them coming together, even the commander couldn't handle it. He had no choice but to agree to Tong Long's request to send troops. However, he stated that he could only bring 2,000 troops and wanted to test the opponent's strength first. Commander Chandula only gave 2,000 cavalrymen, but Tong Long didn't think much of it. In his opinion, quality was more important than quantity. Therefore, he gladly accepted it. He also used his family's connections to find the men of the Nuzan tribe and gathered another 1,000 men. He even gave them war horses. In this way, 3,000 cavalrymen was already a strong force. After preparing for a day with 3,000 cavalrymen, Tong Long left Jian Province's Left Guard city on the third day and headed north. He wanted to find the five-star army and give them a head-on blow. He wanted to let them know that there was still a fierce general like him in Liaodong. The last few times the five-star army appeared here, Tong Long wasn't there. Instead, he was sent by his family to Ming to study Confucianism. The Nuzan tribe had good foresight. They knew what it meant to learn from others' strengths to make up for their weaknesses. They also knew what it meant to do as the Romans did. If they wanted to live more comfortably under the rule of the great Ming dynasty and have more power, they had to learn what they liked. It was precisely because he wasn't in Liaodong at that time that all the things about the five-star army were just legends. As the saying goes, seeing is believing. Naturally, Tong Long wasn't afraid of anyone. What he didn't know was that from the moment he walked out of Jian Province's Left Guard city with 3,000 cavalrymen, his every move was under the eyes of the 1st Cavalry Division. After Tian, who received the order from Yang Chendong, he immediately sent out scouts to watch every Ming Guard city in this area. For a big city like Jian Province's Left Guard city, its geographical location was so crucial and important. Of course, they wouldn't miss it. There were more than 10 scouts outside the city. They were responsible for watching the 4 city gates. Once they made a move, they could immediately report it to the division headquarters. When Tong Long came out with 3,000 cavalrymen, such a mighty formation naturally couldn't escape the eyes of those who were observant. The news was quickly sent to the division commander, Tian Hu. At the foot of an unknown mountain, the division headquarters of the 1st Cavalry Division was built here. What was different from the past was that this time, the mission they received was to stop the enemy. This required them to remain still. Only when they saw the enemy move out would they be able to go out and fight. Therefore, The world's first cavalry division, which had always been roaming around, had built a temporary division headquarters. It was rare for them to rest and also be used for command. When the news came that 3,000 Ming cavalrymen had walked out of Jin province's left-guard city, Tian, who came to the prepared sand table and asked the division headquarters staff officer, "Which regiment is the closest to Jin province's left-guard city?" "Division commander, the 4th Regiment is stationed nearby." The staff officer, who knew the division's situation like the back of his hand, gave the answer immediately. When Tian Hu heard this, he nodded his head in satisfaction and ordered, "Give the order to Commander Bai Shuang of the 4th Regiment. Tell him to take down this cavalry and make the formation bigger. Let the other guards see that our 5-star army is not to be trifled with." Bai Shuang, who was born in the Ming capital's Yang Family Academy, was one of Yang Chundong's favorite students. He was chosen by Yang Chundong because of his proficiency in both civil and martial arts. After a period of training in the army, he was transferred to the 1st Cavalry Division as the commander of the 4th Regiment. Although he was Yang Chundong's student, he was still too young. Many people didn't understand why he was appointed. There were many battle sequences in the 5-star army. If it was just for promotion, then he could have gone to any army. Why did he have to go to the world's 1st Cavalry Division? One had to know that this was the cavalry that could fight the best. They could go to the front lines at any time and fight the enemy with their lives. In this kind of army, if one didn't have real strength, relying on one's background wouldn't work. Bai Shuang still came and became the commander. At that time, many people didn't think well of this matter. However, when he started to carry out his duties as the commander, Bai Shuang's performance blinded many people. Not only did he perfectly complete the tasks given by the division headquarters in every battle, but he also did it at a very small cost. Just like that, the 4th Regiment commander Bai Shuang was accepted by everyone and became the backbone of the 1st Cavalry Division. Now that the 1st Cavalry Division's first battle in the Liaodong region was handed over to Bai Shuang, who was proficient in both civil and martial arts, Tian Hu was completely at ease. Now, he just had to wait for the other party to report back. Soon, the order was sent to Bai Shuang through the scouts. When he saw the military order, he immediately ordered the 4th Regiment to gather. At the same time, he sent out scouts to find out the movements of the 3,000 enemy cavalry and the situation of the commander. Yang Chundong had said more than once that only by knowing yourself and the enemy could you fight every battle well. He also said that the commander of an army was extremely important. He often represented the character and fighting strength of an army. If done well, a fierce tiger leading a group of mountain goats could even defeat a group of tigers led by a mountain goat. Tactically, the enemy was valued. Strategically, the enemy was despised. It was about making all the necessary preparations before a battle. Even if the battle was a battle that one was completely confident in, one must still make all the necessary preparations. Only in this way could one achieve the goal of winning every battle and obtain the greatest victory with the smallest cost. Bai Shuang, who admired Yang Chundong very much, naturally regarded these words as the truth. In fact, he had always done this. Before every battle, he would do his best to understand the situation of the opponent. He would understand the opponent's identity, background, and personal strength, including their strengths and weaknesses, etc. It was because of this that he was able to quickly gain the recognition of everyone and become the commander of the 4th Regiment commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. Fortunately, Yang Xie's intelligence network was very complete. They had done detailed investigations on all the famous people. Therefore, it was not difficult to understand them. Just like when Tong Long led his troops out of the city, some of his information was also sent to Bai Shuang. The scouts who rushed back from the front sent over the information regarding Tong Long. There were a total of 3 pages, so Bai Shuang had a better understanding of his opponent. I didn't expect him to be such a talent. Not only is his strength extraordinary, but he also obtained good results when he was studying in the capital of Ming. There are actually so many people who admire him. After reading Tong Long's information, Bai Shuang could not help but sigh. The introduction in the information was very detailed. Because of this, Bai Shuang felt a sense of admiration. It would be a waste if such a talent was not only used by his teacher. Didn't Yang Chundong always say that it was easy to obtain 1,000 soldiers, but difficult to find a general? Now that such a suitable person had appeared in front of him, if he did not capture him alive, wouldn't it be a waste? Men, bring me the map. After Bai Shuang had a plan, he made a decision in his heart. Tong Long did not know anything about his situation. As the opponent, the five-star army had already grasped everything. He was currently leading 3,000 cavalrymen and galloping around. He wanted to find the main force of the five-star army and then have a decisive battle with them. No one knew the strength of these 3,000 people better than him. Not to mention the 2,000 cavalrymen given by Commander Chindula, their general strength was not bad. For example, the 1,000 Nuzan cavalrymen that were summoned in the end. Which one of them was not proficient in riding a horse? An army like this should be qualified to join the Liaodong Iron Cavalry. Right now, they were only fighting against the five-star army. He really could not think of any possibility of failure. This was the most elite of the Nuzan cavalrymen. Riding on a tall horse, he continuously galloped for 4 hours. Only when the war horse was a bit tired did he stop and let everyone rest for a while. But what he didn't expect was that just as he stopped and didn't give the order to rest, a group of black crows suddenly appeared on the hillside in front of him. Then, a group of five-star soldiers also appeared in his line of sight. "Look, is that the five-star army's cavalry?" A sharp-eyed person shouted. "It seems that they don't have a lot of people. It seems that there are only 300 to 400 of them." An experienced veteran directly shouted out the number of the enemy's forces. Chapter 11:38. There was no doubt that the five-star army was a five-star army, and they only had 300 to 400 soldiers. At this moment, how could Tong Long be courteous? Joy flashed across his eyes, and he shouted loudly, "Brothers, our chance to make a contribution is here. Charge with me." Charge! The 3,000 cavalry shouted at the same time. Their momentum was extremely shocking. When the iron hooves stomped on the ground, the earth trembled. The 3,000 cavalrymen that rushed over attracted the attention of the hundreds of five-star soldiers that appeared on the hillside. When they saw the enemy charging over menacingly, they only hesitated for a few breaths before turning around and fleeing. It was obvious that they could see that the strength of both sides was not equal. Under such circumstances, it was not a wise decision to fight. Just like this, one side ran in front while the other chased from behind. The two sides chased after each other. One side desperately tried to escape from the misfortune of being caught while the other desperately tried to make a contribution. On this piece of land, more than 6 hours had passed as they chased after each other. The sky gradually darkened. The 3,000 cavalry from Liaodong were tired after running for an entire day. Seeing that the distance between them and the enemy hadn't closed by a bit, many people advised Tong Long to rest. The general idea was that since they couldn't catch up, it was better to have a good rest. Their brothers were too tired. Although Tong Long really wanted to establish this merit, he was also clear that it would be very difficult to achieve his goal by chasing after them like this. Although he was a bit unhappy, his rationality won over his emotions. In the end, he gave the order for the army to rest. However, he didn't give up and arranged for a few dozen scouts to continue the chase. He believed that if he was tired, the five-star army wouldn't be any better. This idea was not wrong. When Tong Long and the others had just rested for less than an hour, the scouts rushed back and said that the five-star corps that they were chasing had stopped after seeing that there was no one chasing after them. They were resting on the main road that was 10 miles ahead. They really are tired. Hearing the scouts' report, Tong Long immediately became spirited. He immediately ordered everyone to stop resting and chase after the enemy. They had only rested for a short period of time. Many people only had the opportunity to drink some water and eat some dry rations. They hadn't officially rested yet. However, no one dared to disobey Tong Long's orders. All of them fell into the trap and continued on their way under the guidance of the scouts. After running for 5 kilometers, they saw a wide, flat road in front of them. Several hundred five-star army soldiers were resting. It was a pity that their appearance had the effect of startling the enemy. When the two sides were still 4 miles apart, the five-star army began to flee once again. Chase. Tong Long didn't want to give up just like that, so he continued to spur his horse. Just like that, after a day of rushing, the chase continued for an entire night. Both sides didn't stop to rest, but as a result, their spirits dropped quite a bit. The sky began to brighten, and the five-star army could be seen more clearly. However, they were still 4 li away, and it was truly hopeless. General, let's take a break. If we continue to chase like this, I'm afraid we'll never be able to catch up. One of the Baihu who sensed that his warhorse's fur was soaked through couldn't help but speak up. With someone taking the lead, very quickly, more and more voices echoed out. Tong Long, who knew that the law couldn't punish too many people, hesitated for a moment. He was prepared to give the order to stop the chase and take a good rest. However, at this moment, another Baihu suddenly shouted, "Look, their speed seems to have slowed down. It seems like they can't hold on any longer." Is that so? It seems like it. Yes, I can see it too. Their speed seems to have slowed down quite a bit. Haha, compared to our riding skills, it seems like they're still lacking. At this moment, all sorts of discussions began to spread. This was equivalent to giving Tong Long a shot of confidence. He immediately laughed and said, "Good, victory is right in front of us. We can't give up. Now is the time to compete with our willpower. Whoever can persevere the most, victory will belong to them. Everyone, charge with me." Another chase began. Just as everyone wished, the distance between the two sides increased from 4 li to 3 li. At the closest point, it was almost 2 li. If it wasn't for the fact that the five-star army knew that once they were caught, they would definitely be dead, and had unleashed their potential several times to increase their speed, they would have been caught by now. After a day and a night, it was another day. It wasn't until the afternoon when the sun was about to set that the chasing group arrived at the side of a large mountain. At this point, no matter if they were running or chasing, they had all given it their all. If it wasn't for that trace of willpower still causing trouble, everyone would have stopped long ago. Even so, half of the 3,000 Liaodong cavalrymen had already slowed down. Some of them were even swaying on their horses. It seemed like they would fall asleep as soon as the order to rest was given. Tock, 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 tock. Under the setting sun, the sound of armored horses galloping could be heard from the quiet mountain, causing snowflakes to fall from the branches of the trees on the mountain. When Tong Long saw all of this, he turned pale with fright. This kind of sound, this kind of effect, it must be a new cavalry group. If it was his allies, then it would be fine. But if it was the five-star army, then they would really be in danger. If there were more of them, then these 3,000 people would be thrown here. Sometimes, the more one was afraid of something, the more likely it would happen. Just as Tong Long placed his hopes on the sudden arrival of the cavalry, the bright red flag of the five-star army appeared. There were at least 1,000 of them, and they were neat and orderly in formation. With one look, one could tell that they were an iron army that had been honing their strength for a long time. Needless to say, they were the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division's 4th Regiment. Even the 400 cavalrymen that had been running before were part of them. When they saw the main force arrive, the 5th Battalion commander who was in charge of luring the enemy chuckled. He stood at attention at the front of the group and said, reporting to regiment commander, the 5th Battalion successfully completed the mission of sneaking away from the enemy. They said sneaking away from the enemy and not luring them. This in itself already showed that they did it on purpose. Very good, the 5th Battalion will record this merit. Now go and rest. Leave everything to the other 4 battalions. Bai Shuang said happily. No, please approve. Our 5th Battalion can still fight. Even if our combat strength is weaker, we still have the stamina to capture prisoners. The 5th Battalion commander chuckled and requested to participate in the battle. Approved. You guys will be in charge of the periphery. Clean up the battlefield later. Bai Shuang also laughed out loud as he spoke. Then, he turned around and gave the order. The 4 battalions behind him formed an arrow formation. If everyone was full of energy, Tong Long would still have some confidence in fighting against 2,000 with 3,000. But now, they were exhausted. After running for 2 days and 1 night, they did not even have 2 hours of rest. At this moment, they were afraid that they could not even use 20% of their usual strength. How could they talk about winning the battle? The appearance of the 5-star army caused Tong Long's expression to change drastically. The cavalrymen behind him were all panting with ugly expressions. Get ready, charge. Bai Shuang didn't give them any time to rest. Perhaps this was originally an unfair battle, but this was the result of his plan. It must be said that it was also a part of his strength. If he had to blame someone, he could only blame Tong Long for being too greedy. He always wanted to gain merit. The 4 battalions, totaling 1,600 cavalrymen of the 1st Cavalry Division, charged forward. They were either wielding a saber in one hand and a shield in the other, or wielding a saber in both hands. Just like this, with unstoppable momentum, they charged toward the enemy. By the time they formed several dozen arrow-tipped formations and fiercely pierced into the 3,000 Liaodong cavalry, victory or defeat was already decided. Even if they were in their peak condition, they wouldn't be able to gain any advantage. Now that their strength was less than 20%, how could they fight this battle? Facing the charge of the 1st Cavalry Division, a lot of people wanted to raise their blades to meet them. They could even see the direction of the blades clearly. But because of their lack of strength, they were able to display their weak side in a head-on clash. Some of these cavalrymen who should have been able to fight for a few rounds were knocked off their horses. Some of them fought for 2 rounds, but they were also knocked to the ground because of their lack of strength. Tong Long was worthy of being called a valiant general. Even if he didn't sleep for 2 days and 1 night, and didn't even have a good drink of water when he really faced the enemy, he still showed his valiant side. Even when he was surrounded by 4 soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division, he was still able to fight evenly. Tong Long's performance was seen by Bai Shuang. He couldn't help but nod his head. It was rare for the Bai Ming army to have such a tough general, so he didn't have any plans to give up. This kind of talent must be used by the 6th young master. Get out of the way. I'll fight him. Bai Shuang was itching to fight. Most importantly, he was afraid that his soldiers would really hurt Tong Long. So he personally rode over and stood in front of Tong Long. At this moment, Tong Long was panting heavily. Although he didn't lose in the battle just now, he was actually just using up his strength. He couldn't hold on for long, but his pride still made him persevere. Even when facing Bai Shuang, who was also extraordinary, he didn't show any fear. Who are you? Tell me your name. I don't kill nameless generals. Bai Shuang, who was wearing a black cloak, didn't immediately answer Tong Long's question. Instead, he first looked him up and down, then nodded slightly. Not bad. You have a good temperament. Teachers should like you. This kind of question and answer angered Tong Long. He was an existence that could call the wind and summon the rain in the Jin province left guard. Who would dare to look at him like this? It was as if they were admiring an object. This also made him very angry as he said, "Who are you? Tell me your name, and I will not kill you." Chapter 11:39. All right, my name is Bai Shuang. I am the commander of the 4th Regiment of the 1st Cavalry Division. If you surrender now, you can still live. Otherwise, I'm afraid that this day next year will be the anniversary of your death. Bai Shuang did as the other party wished and reported his name. Then, he looked at the other party with interest. If this person surrendered now, although he could still live, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. Tong Long, who was already somewhat exhausted, would naturally not be frightened by Bai Shuang's words. His expression was cold as he said, "Stop talking nonsense. How can a man surrender to others? If you have the ability, then kill me. If you don't, then be killed by me. Take this." Tong Long knew that his stamina could not hold on for much longer. If he did not make a move now, the longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. After knowing Bai Shuang's name, he immediately made his move. Tong Long was using an extremely sharp saber that looked a little like the weapon used by the Mongolian cavalry when they were roaming the world. It was polished until it shone brightly. When he swung it in the air, because it was fast enough, it actually brought about streaks of white saber and tint, gaining the upper hand by a show of strength. Just now, Tong Long had used this kind of fearless blade aura to force the 4 elite soldiers of the 1st Heavenly Cavalry Division to be unable to gain the slightest advantage. Bai Shuang used a red cherry blossom spear that was about 2 meters long. The spear technique was passed down from a spear master. After his own research and continuous training, it finally became a unique technique. The spear technique was strong and heavy, but also slightly agile and tricky. With this set of skills, it was difficult to find an opponent in the entire division. Only the division commander Tian, who could defeat him with the full strength of his twin blades. In weapons, there was a saying that the longer the weapon, the stronger the weapon, and the shorter the weapon, the more dangerous it was. If Tong Long was at his peak, he would be able to exchange dozens of blows with Bai Shuang. It would be difficult to determine the victor. However, right now, he had used up 80% of his strength. How could he be a match for Bai Shuang, who was using his full strength? After exchanging 2 blows, the scimitar fell to the ground. The third blow, the long spear smacked Tong Long's back, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood and fall to the ground. Tong Long fell to the ground and fainted. Immediately, other soldiers came forward and tied him up tightly. Looking at the opponent that he had knocked out, Bai Shuang nodded lightly. Even though they had only exchanged 2 moves, he could still feel that his opponent's strength was not ordinary and his moves were sharp. Call the medics over and take a good look at him. We can't let anything happen to him. When Bai Shuang knocked Tong Long to the ground and looked up at the battlefield, the battle was basically over. Apart from a few people who were still resisting, most of the Liaodong cavalry had fallen off their horses. Some had even knelt down and surrendered. It wasn't that he didn't want to fight, but that he couldn't. Under the conditions of hunger and cold, it was already not easy to ride a horse. If they wanted to fight with a sword, especially when facing a strong opponent, they would not have a good ending. Those who did not want to die simply chose to surrender. 2,000 people against 3,000 people, and only a few dozen of them were injured. None of them died. Looking at the opponent, almost 100 of them were killed, and the rest were all captured. Not a single one escaped. Even their general was captured. This was definitely a great victory. Commander, although the opponent this time is strong, if we fight them head-on, we won't be afraid of them. We will definitely win. Seeing that the situation was settled, the commander of the 1st Battalion came in front of Bai Shuang and said unhappily, "What? Do you feel that winning like this isn't fair enough? Let me tell you, on the battlefield, as long as you can defeat your opponent, it's fine. As for what method to use, it depends on the benevolent and the wise. If it's possible, it's best to win without fighting. Do you understand?" "No." The commander of the 1st Battalion, who was about to refute, suddenly heard Bai Shuang say, "That's right. What I said just now was taught to me by my teacher." "No wrong. Well said." Once he heard that it was Yang Qindong who said it, the commander of the 1st Battalion did not dare to refute. The commander of the 1st Battalion could still give some opinions to the commander, but in front of Yang Qindong, the creator of Yang Xie, who was like a god of war, he did not have the slightest intention to refute. He knew that the commander of the 1st Battalion would have such a reaction. Bai Shuang laughed in his heart and waved his hand. "Clean up the battlefield well. Take away everything that can be used. Don't leave anything behind." Just like that, Tong Long was captured. Tian, who purposely got someone to spread the news after he found out about the outcome, as if to shock everyone. In an instant, the nearby city guards all knew about it. When they heard that even a fierce general like Tong Long was taken care of by the 5-star army, and that not a single one of the 3,000 cavalry came back to report, everyone was terrified of the 5-star army. The people who originally wanted to send out troops to try their luck all stopped moving and stayed in their own cities like cowards. In this period of time, the news of the 5-star army entering Liaodong had been sent to the northern Ming capital in the form of an urgent dispatch. They had just taken down the 2 cities of Shajing and Jingzhou and were thinking of expanding their gains and uprooting Yang Qindong's forces in the grasslands. Suddenly, this news was sent to the imperial court and immediately attracted the attention of countless people. Even Emperor Zhu Qiyu was confused. What's going on? Shouldn't Bugnam of Gojoseon be fighting with great General Ashikaga Yoshimasa in the Japanese Empire? For this reason, he had sent Songyong and 50,000 naval troops to help. How long had it been since the battle ended? How did Bugnam of Gojoseon appear in Liaodong? What's going on? And what about the 50,000 naval troops he had sent out? Where were they now? Why was there no news of them? Could it be that they had been destroyed by Bugnam of Gojoseon? That was 50,000 people, and they were at sea. It wasn't that easy to wipe them all out. Why wasn't there a single warship that reported the news? Countless questions appeared in Zhu Qiyu's mind. This unexpected situation disrupted Zhu Qiyu's plans. Because Shajing and Jingzhou had been peacefully taken back, and he had obtained the 5-star army, Zhu Qiyu was filled with confidence. Who said that Bugnam of Gojoseon was invincible? Didn't he win? Since that was the case, of course, he would continue to work hard to take down Shur City and uproot the five-star army's forces in the grassland. This idea was quickly approved by the other king of the grassland, Yeshin. On the grassland, Yeshin was really afraid of the five-star army. At least, every battle ended with his defeat. If he could destroy the five-star army and replace it with Ming, it would be great. He believed that it wouldn't be long before he could still be a king. Therefore, Zhu Qiyu didn't have to spend much effort to reach an alliance with Yeshin. The two sides agreed that one side would send out 400,000 troops, and the other side would send out 200,000 troops. They would definitely take down Shur City with high walls and drive Yang Xie's forces out of this area. Both sides were mobilizing their troops. After all, it involved an army of 600,000. Just the preparation of food and drink would take some time, not to mention the military supplies. Unexpectedly, something happened in Liaodong so quickly. If it was in the past, Zhu Qiyu wouldn't panic even if Liaodong's predecessor, Nu or Gandusi, was attacked. After all, it was a bitter and cold place in his opinion. Other than being able to ensure the safety of the northern territory, it had no other use. However, it was different now. He had 70,000 Liaodong cavalrymen. They had now become the most elite existence in the Ming army. They could even scare off the five-star army. How could such a powerful army, the headquarters of such a powerful army, a place where countless brave warriors could be produced, how could they just watch as it was lost? He couldn't lose Liaodong, and he couldn't let Yang Chendong use this opportunity to open a supply route. Zhu Qiyu immediately ordered a court meeting. He wanted to gather all the officials to discuss a solution to the problem. For this court assembly, in order to achieve the effect of everyone working together, Zhu Qiyu specially allowed all fourth-ranked officials and above to participate. The same went for fourth-ranked generals. In order to maintain balance in the Great Ming dynasty, the status of the generals was usually not very high. Most of them were even regarded as boorish. Sometimes, even a second-ranked general's status was not as high as a fourth-ranked civil official's. Usually, during the court meeting, there were even fewer opportunities for the generals to participate. This time, Zhu Qiyu intended to raise the status of the generals. From this point alone, it could be seen that Zhu Qiyu was really anxious. The expansion of the court assembly this time had indeed attracted many officials to participate. Just looking down from the dragon throne, it was a sea of black crows and crows. There were more than 200 people. Looking at so many officials below the stage, Zhu Qiyu smiled and breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't believe that with so many talented people, he wouldn't be able to defeat a small Bugnam of Gojoseon. In his joy, Zhu Qiyu looked at Jin Ying, who was standing to the side, and nodded. The court meeting began. There was no need to talk about the topic. Those who were able to appear here naturally knew what was going on. Thus, from the beginning of the court meeting, there were officials who continuously gave suggestions. Each and every one of them spoke endlessly, as if each of them had thousands of ideas in their hearts. However, if one were to listen carefully, they would discover that most of their words were flattering Zhu Qiyu and flattering her. The general idea was that although the king was strong, how could he dare to face the emperor? As long as the army marched into the Liaodong region, the so-called Wu Nanwang, the so-called five-star army, would flee as soon as they heard the news. They would surrender without a fight. At first, Zhu Qiyu was in a good mood. However, the more he listened, the more he found that this wasn't the case. More than an hour had passed, and no one had really come up with any ideas. They were all just saying nice things. Seeing that more and more people would have this opinion if he didn't stop them, Zhu Qiyu couldn't help but cough lightly. Then, he said, "Everyone, we naturally know that a small Bugnam of Gojoseon is not to be feared. However, according to your suggestions, how many people should be sent this time? And who should be the commander?" When it came to the specific questions, the noisy court immediately quieted down. Chapter 1140. Most of the people who could come here were civil officials. They either relied on their writings or relied on their family's influence to get to their positions. Some even relied on some shady means to get to their positions. But no matter how they entered the court, Most of them had a common characteristic, and that was that they could speak but not act. It was undeniable that Confucianism could indeed teach people to be good and change the wildness in a person's heart. There were also other benefits, but the drawbacks were equally obvious. Some things were too rule-abiding. After a long time, they would become complacent. It was like moving their mouths and talking. They dared to comment on anything. Some of them even dared to criticize the emperor. But when it came to practical matters, they really couldn't do it. This didn't mean that they didn't have the ability, but because when two sides fought, the other side wouldn't listen to you. If there was a disagreement, they would draw their swords. This wasn't something that these scholars who studied Confucianism could compare to. It was important for people to know their own limits. If they knew that they couldn't do something, but still insisted on standing up, then it wasn't taking responsibility, but showing off. To put it bluntly, it was no different from courting death. It was just like the Timu fortress incident back then. How many civil officials of northern Ming had died? Among them, there were many who were truly talented. However, in the face of the ferocious Walla cavalry, were their eloquent tongues really of any use? No. After the previous incident, the imperial court was much quieter this time. For a time, Zhu Qiyu, who was originally full of hope, suddenly had an ugly expression. Just now, when everyone was talking so excitedly, he thought that they had already thought of a countermeasure. But now, it seemed that this wasn't the case at all. His gaze swept past the civil official group and naturally landed on the military general group, which had very few people. When it came to specific matters, especially when it came to leading troops to war, it still depended on the generals. But what made Zhu Qiyu a little disappointed was that even these generals who practiced martial arts didn't take the initiative to stand up at this moment. Instead, they all lowered their heads and pondered about something, as if there was something valuable under their feet that was worth attracting. The Great Ming Dynasty had a long history of valuing literature and despising the military. It wasn't something that could be changed overnight. Although because of the changes in the political situation, the status of the generals had increased, but there was still a big gap between the two sides. Let's use a simple example. What is the most important thing in a war? Some people might talk about the morale of the soldiers, some would talk about the bravery of the generals, some would talk about whether this was a battle of justice, and some would talk about the right time, the right place, the right people, and so on. But the real key was logistics. In other words, it referred to the supply of food, fodder, and weapons. Think about it. If an army that was capable of fighting did not have food to eat and only had wooden sticks in their hands, how could they fight the enemy? How could they use their teeth to bite the enemy? Tear it apart with your bare hands? Thus, there was a saying that war was a war for money. It just so happened that the logistics of the army were decided by the civil officials. This was equivalent to having one's Achilles heel pressed down. Even if one wanted to fight alone, one couldn't. How could one win a battle in such a situation? Just like the 70,000 Liaodong cavalry. Why did they develop so quickly? Why were they so elite that even the 5-star army in Origin City was afraid of them? It was nothing more than that they had enough autonomy. They could harvest grain and grass on the grassland like the Mongolian cavalry. They could snatch good things when they saw them, which made them stronger and stronger. It was impossible to send troops to Liaodong without any taboos. It could be imagined that no matter who led the troops, the logistics would be fought over. This involved a lot of benefits. Whoever had the advantage would get countless benefits from it. Once the war was won, these people would not only get the benefits, but they would also get the credit. If they were defeated, it would have nothing to do with them. The responsibility would all fall on the generals who led the troops. With this comparison, it was no wonder that the generals were not willing to stand up and take the responsibility that originally belonged to them. Not to mention, the opponent of this battle was Bugnam of Gojoseon. This person had the title of the god of war. How could he be so easy to deal with? The generals were all silent. Zhu Qiyu was a little angry. Before he could say anything, the civil officials at the side had already launched an attack. Perhaps they also felt that the contrast between just now and now was too big. They were afraid that the emperor would vent his anger on them. Therefore, they were ruthless and as unpleasant as they could be. What's wrong? Aren't you generals? Your duty is to go to the battlefield and kill the enemy. Even if you die on the battlefield, you won't hesitate. This is your destiny. That's right. Isn't it your duty to send troops to war? Why are you afraid of death now? None of you dare to accept the challenge. It's really disappointing. No wonder Bugnam of Gojoseon is so arrogant. It's all because of you useless people. You useless things. You really don't know what to do. You really make people look down on you. Yes, it's too disappointing. The imperial court spent so much money to feed you. The criticism came one after another. It was as if they couldn't show their righteousness if they didn't step on them. In just a short while, the generals' faces were as red as a monkey's buttocks. Some of the more thin-skinned ones wanted to find a hole to hide in. This was really like the saying, those who enjoy the show are not afraid of things getting out of hand. Faced with the criticism of the entire civil officials, a general called Li Tong finally couldn't take it anymore. As a second-grade general in the imperial court, he naturally had his own personal pride. Especially now that the status of a general was rising step by step, he was very optimistic about the future. More than once, he had told the other generals in private that spring was coming for the generals. But now, before he could achieve his goal, he was being slandered in such a way. He was really angry. When he saw that the other generals and colleagues were all evasive and didn't even dare to fart in front of the civil officials, he angrily stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, this subject is willing to lead the army, but I have a request." Finally, someone was willing to take the initiative to step forward. Naturally, Zhu Qiyu was overjoyed. When he looked at the person, even his gaze became much friendlier. "Oh, General Li, I don't know what request you have. Why don't you tell me? I hope that the matter of the provisions will be managed by the officials I've chosen." In this way, Li Tong boldly made his request. Just as he was about to continue speaking, he didn't expect that the civil officials had already exploded. How is this possible? This is against the rules. Then, won't everything be decided by you generals? Once you have disloyal thoughts, how can you control it? Absolutely not. If something really happens, it will be a big matter. It will be much more dangerous than the matter in Liaodong. Yes, we absolutely can't agree. The discussion rose again, followed by a group attack. Li Tong, who wasn't good with words, was instantly drowned in a sea of verbal attacks. This time, not only would the civil officials not agree, but even Emperor Zhu Qiyu wouldn't agree. As an emperor, as a monarch, how could he control his army? Wasn't it shown by eating, drinking, and defecating? If he gave the generals too much power, who knew if it would spur some people's ambitions and cause them to do something unfavorable to him? If that was the case, then he would suffer a great loss. No emperor would agree to such a dangerous matter, let alone Zhu Qiyu, who had forcefully taken the throne. Perhaps it was because he didn't take the right path when he took the throne, so he was very afraid that someone would threaten him. It was even more impossible for him to agree to Li Tong's request. Shaking his head, Zhu Qiyu said with an unquestionable tone, "Generally, you've heard everyone's reaction. We absolutely can't agree to this matter." Zhu Qiyu's words set the tone for the matter. Li Tong knew that it was useless to say more. However, since he had already stepped out, it was impossible for him to retreat. He could only cup his hands and say, "Since it's like this, everything will be decided by your Majesty. This subject will only be responsible for leading the troops to fight." Li Tong was forced to accept the challenge. In a situation where no other general stepped out, Zhu Qiyu finally appointed him as the general leading the troops. He took 200,000 soldiers, 50,000 of which were veterans, and 150,000 of which were new recruits. He ordered them to prepare within 7 days and send troops to support Liaodong. As if to ease Li Tong's heart, Zhu Qiyu especially said during the court meeting that no matter who was in charge of logistics and provisions, they couldn't make things difficult for General Li and had to do their best to cooperate. The officials naturally agreed, but no one knew what would happen. Su Yozhen, the Crown Prince's junior tutor, Grand Scholar and Minister of Justice, didn't say anything from beginning to end. He just watched coldly from the sidelines and sneered in his heart. Before the troops had even been sent out, General Li Tong had already attracted the dissatisfaction of the civil officials. Li Tong could even imagine that it would be strange if he wasn't targeted. If he didn't do this, how could the civil officials vent their anger of being accused of not trusting him? It seemed that the result of this battle had already been decided. Sigh, Could it be that the great Ming's luck was really coming to an end? The Hu estate, Minister of Rights Hu Shao. Although he still had the title of minister, he hadn't been to court for a while. This was because the relationship between Ming and Bugnam of Gojoseon had changed greatly. This made his position as Yang Chundong's father-in-law very awkward. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble and to avoid being targeted, Hu Shao was sick and stayed at home. Not only that, but the other members of the Hu family were also ordered to stay at home and not go out. They had to be as low-key as possible. Chapter 1141. Although he had not left his room, he was still able to receive news of what had happened in the imperial court. Hu Shao had been the Minister of Rights for many years, and his students were spread all over the world. He naturally had many sources of information. It was precisely because he knew what had happened in the imperial court that Hu Shao, who was with his son in his study, fell into deep thought. Hu Zhangning also knew what had happened in the imperial court, and he was much more nervous than his father. Father, the emperor is about to move against Chandong. Will we be implicated? How about I go find the 5-star army in the city? There's no need for that. It's not time yet. Hu Shao slowly opened his eyes, a faint smile on his lips. It was clear that everything was under his control. Son, don't think that we'll be in danger if we really start fighting. It's said that even when two armies fight, they don't kill the envoys. But father, seeing that Hu Zhangning was about to say something, Hu Shao waved his hand and said, Relax. Since Zhu Qiyu was able to become emperor, he's not so foolish. He's keenly aware that before he destroys Bugnam of Gojoseon, he won't be able to touch us. Otherwise, he doesn't even know what the consequences will be. On the contrary, the more victories Bugnam of Gojoseon wins on the front lines, the more apprehensive the emperor will be. Unless it's time for a life-and-death struggle, as long as we don't stir up trouble, nothing will happen. The older the ginger, the spicier it was. Hu Shao was so confident not only because of his thorough analysis of the situation and his deep understanding of Zhu Qiyu's personality, but also because of two other reasons. First, Su Yozhen was in the imperial court. If something really did happen, he would definitely inform him. Second, Ming had Yang Chundong's brothers and sisters in the capital. If even they were fine, how could he possibly be in danger? With these two reasons, Hu Shao was naturally brimming with confidence. On the contrary, he was now worried about whether Yang Chundong could stop Ming's army. If Yang Chundong was seriously injured, or even destroyed, then as his in-laws, they would be seen as accomplices. That would be the real danger. Not to mention that the Hu mansion was as calm as water. Yang Chundong, who was running amok in Liaodong, had telegraphed everything that happened there to him. Looking at the telegram sent by Wang Shan, Yang Chundong chuckled and said, 200,000? Aren't they looking down on our 5-star army too much? After a brief evaluation, Yang Chundong put it aside. Obviously, he had already predicted that Ming would send troops, so he wasn't surprised by what he had expected. His main focus was now on the next territory to be conquered, Gulinwei. Ever since Yang Chundong brought Longxi, Shifu to the northern part of Liaodong, everything went smoothly. Besieging a city was as easy as entering an uninhabited land. In addition, the surrendered General Song Yong played a big role. Just like the previous Xixin guards, they didn't even fire a shot. Song Yong entered the city first to persuade them to surrender and occupied the city. More than 1,000 Ming soldiers and tens of thousands of great Ming people were included in Yang Xie's territory. This time, to deal with Gulinwei, Yang Chundong used the same trick. Song Yong volunteered to go first, and once they occupied the city, it was tantamount to opening the southwest gate of New Ergon Duxi's headquarters. They weren't far from their goal. Young Master, High Sea Shifu sent a telegram. They have entered Kuwu Island, Sakhalin Island in the future, along the waterway. After a fierce battle, they successfully occupied it. Beta Persei brought a telegram that he had just received to Yang Chundong's temporary tent. Good. When he heard the news, Yang Chundong couldn't help but laugh heartily. Kuwu Island was occupied, which meant that Commander Song Quan had no way to retreat on the sea. He had to either fight with him or surrender. There was no third choice. As if confirming the saying, good things come in pairs, not long after, Song Yong also rushed back. Along with him was Gu Linwei's grandxian Hu Zhe. Obviously, he had been persuaded, and this time, he was here to surrender. Similarly, it didn't take much effort to capture Gu Linwei. Yang Chendong was one step closer to achieving his goal of capturing Liaodong. Very good, Song Yong did well. Tell him that he will be heavily rewarded. When we completely capture Tu Ergon Duxi's headquarters, we will definitely reward him. Yang Chendong said with a smile. Although Song Yong was a surrendered general and his ability to fight was not very good, his eloquence was not bad. He was also a talent. Yang Chendong had already thought about it. After the war, he would send him to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He should be able to play a big role. After Gu Linwei was taken down, the next target would be the Fushan Guards, which was the Turlinwei Guards' headquarters. Once they took down this place, they would be able to directly face the highest level of power in the Liaodong region. If they could take down this place without shedding any blood, it would be perfect. Beta Persei passed the message to Song Yong. Song Yong was naturally excited. He originally thought that he was just a surrendered general and would never have the chance to raise his head in this life. He didn't expect that he would be able to enter the eyes of Bugnam of Gojoseon. Thinking about his future, he decided to continue to make contributions. So after returning to the barracks to rest for a night, he continued to rush forward and went straight to Tu Ergon Duxi's headquarters. Yang Chendong led the army through Gu Linwei early the next morning. At this time, it was already May. The weather was getting warmer and warmer. After the snow melted, the speed of the army's advance was also a lot faster. 2 days later, Song Yong sent news that Tu Ergon Duxi's headquarters was already empty. Whether it was the soldiers or the people in the headquarters, they had all disappeared. They should have all gathered in Tu Ergon Duxi's headquarters, so Song Yong directly went to Tu Ergon Duxi's headquarters in the Liaodong region. Another 5 days passed. When Yang Chendong led the army to Tu Ergon Duxi's headquarters, bad news came. The cavalry scouts reported that Song Yong's head was hung on the city wall of Tu Ergon Duxi's headquarters. As soon as the news reached Yang Chendong's ears, he was shocked and furious. Although Song Yong was a surrendered general, he was now representing the 5-star army. As the saying goes, envoys should not be killed in a war. Song Yong was killed just like that. This was clearly a slap to the 5-star army's face. It was a slap to the Bugnam of Gojoseon's face. Young master, Song Yong can't die just like that. This is clearly looking down on our 5-star army. Let's fight. Beta Persei's eyes were shining as he spoke. Along the way, he originally thought that there would be a big battle to fight. This was the time to show off his skills. He didn't expect things to go so smoothly. Originally, he thought that Tu Ergon Duxi would surrender. Although he would be happy, he didn't go to the battlefield after all. But now, Song Yong was killed. This was clearly a demonstration by the Ming generals of Tu Ergon Duxi. If he didn't kill this trend, who would take the 5-star army seriously in the future? Yang Chendong didn't answer immediately. Although Song Yong's death made him very angry, he couldn't solve the problem by being impulsive. The most important thing now was to understand the situation in Tu Ergon Duxi. Only by understanding the other party's background would he be able to come up with the best strategy. Beta Persei, contact the intelligence personnel in Tu Ergon Duxi immediately. I want to know how many Ming army there are here and who killed Song Yong. Yes, young master. Beta Persei nodded and turned to leave. Yang Chendong's eyes were cold and angry. Someone actually dared to kill one of his men, and an envoy at that. He had to admit that some people were really bold. Since that was the case, he didn't mind being ruthless and using some cruel means to tell the world what would happen if they didn't follow the rules. The intelligence department acted very quickly. Yang San, the head of the security bureau, had already arranged a lot of people here, so the situation in the city quickly spread out. According to a centurion bribed by the security bureau, Song Yong's death was caused by Zhong Cheng, the commander of the city. The telegram described the whole process of Song Yong's death in detail. Originally, as an envoy, Song Yong could have left the city safely if he failed to persuade them to surrender. As the commander, Song Quan also had the same idea. Although he didn't like his own family and thought that they had no backbone, he would still abide by the rules of war between two armies. Things went bad because of Zhong Cheng. He didn't know where he found out that Song Yong had 100,000 taels of silver on him. This was originally given to him by Yang Chandong. If he succeeded in persuading Song Yong to surrender, this would be their way of expressing their sincerity. Logically speaking, if they didn't reach an agreement, Song Yong should have left the city and wouldn't have handed over the 100,000 taels of silver. But the greedy Zhong Cheng didn't care about this. He thought that since they were going to become enemies, it would be a waste if he didn't take the 100,000 taels. So he led the soldiers to stop Song Yong at the city gate and asked him to hand over the banknotes. Otherwise, he would die. After Song Yong was chosen by Yang Chandong, his whole person changed. He had a bright future, so of course he wouldn't hand over the banknotes and show his incompetence again. Considering that he was an envoy of the 5-star army, not only did he not hand over the banknotes, he also loudly reprimanded Zhong Cheng, making the soldiers at the city gate hear clearly. Being reprimanded in public like this, Zhong Cheng's face naturally didn't look good. In a rage, he swung his sword and chopped Song Quan. Naturally, the 100,000 taels of silver also fell into Zhong Cheng's pocket. This matter was seen by many people, so Zhong Cheng deliberately said that this was the fate of those who dared to surrender to the 5-star army. "You're courting death." Yang Chandong's face was full of anger. He punched the sand table that was temporarily set up. With just one punch, the solid wood table was completely destroyed. "Young master, calm down. This Zhong Cheng really deserves to die." The intelligence department also sent news that this person's reputation in the city isn't good, especially his greed and lust. That's known by everyone. Just counting the number of concubines, he has taken as many as 13 and even gave birth to 3 fat sons for him. His eldest son is already 12 years old and is now running amok in the city. I heard that he's even worse than his father. Beta Persei also said with a face full of anger. Chapter 1142. They're all in cahoots, Yang Chandong said angrily. "Young master, the Zhong family is one of the biggest merchants in the Ming capital. They've taken quite a lot of goods from our commerce department and earned quite a bit of money. Do you want to deal with his family? We'll let them know the consequences of not following the rules of the 5-star army," Beta Persei said when he saw that the young master's anger had yet to dissipate. People always said that one shouldn't bring trouble to one's family. Yang Chandong naturally wouldn't casually bring trouble to Zhong Cheng's family. But since his 12-year-old son was a bad person, it was normal to get rid of him according to the rules. As for the Zhong family, sorry, but they'll be removed from the list of merchants in the future. I'll take note of this. After we take down Terran City, we'll still have to hold a trial. At that time, we'll let the people decide. If Zhong Cheng really didn't teach his son well, it's better to get rid of him as soon as possible. Yang Chandong didn't say it explicitly, but he didn't object. This was enough to explain everything. Dealing with Zhong Cheng would have to wait until they took down Terran City. The most important thing now was how to take down the city. According to the intelligence department, in order to prepare for the arrival of the 5-star army, the commander had gathered some of the nearby guards in Terran City. In addition to the original soldiers in the city, the Ming army now had close to 100,000 people. It was truly a powerful force. On the other hand, Yang Chandong only had 8,000 elite soldiers from the 4th Infantry Division, 20,000 North Korean C-rank soldiers, and the Northern Ming Guards who had come all the way to Long, which added up to about 10,000. Altogether, there were no more than 40,000 people. 40,000 against 100,000, and it was the main attack. This was basically impossible in the eyes of others, but in Yang Chandong's eyes, it was a completely different matter. The reason why he brought the 4th Division and not the other cavalry troops was to attack the city. Now, it seemed that he had to use it. Inform the commander to prepare to attack the city. Inform the other troops to prepare to assist in the attack. Inform the 4th Division of the Sea to be on standby and prepare to bombard Terran City. Yang Chandong gave out orders one after another. Since they didn't have enough troops and the enemy still wanted to defend, it was impossible to solve the problem peacefully. They might as well use the most powerful firearms. Even though it would inevitably cause some unnecessary casualties, it was better than losing their own men and losing their own soldiers. Ling Dechang was very excited when he received the order. Ever since he entered the Liaodong region, he had been looking for a chance to show off his skills. From the telegram, he found out that both the 1st Cavalry Division and the new army had done a lot. Only his 4th Division hadn't done anything. All they did was follow the 6th Young Master and take over some of the cities that Song Yong had occupied. This made him feel very unbalanced. To be able to follow the 6th Young Master, it was the perfect opportunity to show off his skills. Now that he didn't do anything, it would be a lie to say that he didn't feel wronged at all. Even in his dreams, he wanted to show off the strength of the 4th Division. He originally thought that Song Yong had gone to Terran City and that he wouldn't have a chance. Now, the Liaodong army dared to kill Song Yong, who was in the middle of a peace negotiation. This angered the 6th Young Master. Now, it was time for them to show off. Gather the entire division and prepare for battle. Tell the 4 regimental commanders to report to me. After Ling Decheng finished speaking, he laughed heartily and went to the sand table to plan the attack. Within Terran City, Commanding Officer Song Quan sat in the main hall with a dignified expression. Beside him sat Commander Zhong Cheng and Commander Qian Shi Yi Ligong. Commanding Officer Song Quan was a Grade 2 general. To be able to reach this position, Song Quan was quite capable. Furthermore, from the fact that he hadn't moved from his position for 7 years, it could be seen that he was a smooth and slick person. The Great Ming dynasty valued the civil and despised the military. This was especially so for the generals who held great power. It was very easy for the emperor to be suspicious of them. Reality also proved that if it wasn't for the emperor's suspicion and the civil officials' jealousy, the Great Ming dynasty wouldn't have been destroyed. As a commanding officer of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, Song Quan was able to sit in his position for 7 years. This was enough to show that he was very good at dealing with people. Otherwise, he would have been suppressed to death by the civil officials. It was because of this that when he heard that the 5-star Army's peace envoy, Song Yong, had died at the city gates, his face instantly darkened. His position meant that he couldn't surrender to Yang Chendong. Unless there was an order from the Baiming Emperor, if he really did so, none of his family members in the Baiming capital would be able to survive. However, he didn't make this decision of his own accord. As a general who held great power in the military, Song Quan had a deep understanding of the 5-star army. It was because of this that he knew how powerful the other party was. This kind of enemy wasn't someone he could fight against. He couldn't surrender, and he couldn't win. Song Quan was prepared to sacrifice himself for a righteous cause to protect his family in the capital. Therefore, in the face of Song Yong's words, all he could do was to drive the other party away and wait for Yang Chendong to fight. When the time was right, he would commit suicide. With his own life, he could exchange the safety of his whole family, or he could also protect the safety of the people in the city. But he didn't expect Zhong Cheng to be so daring as to force Song Yong to kill out of greed. This would create a situation where only one side would be able to survive. When the time came, even if he died, the civilians in the city wouldn't have it easy either. Did this Zhong Cheng not have a brain? Did he not know that once the 5-star army took Terran City, all the money he had would be nothing more than a wedding dress for the enemy? What was the use of money that couldn't be taken? And even if it was taken, it was useless. But it was too late to say anything now. Song Yong was already dead, and the dead couldn't be brought back to life. What they had to do now was to solve the current problem and save as many people as possible with the least amount of casualties. Looking at Zhong Cheng with a murderous gaze, Song Quan said, "General Zhong, Song Yong is already dead. The 5-star army will be attacking the city soon. Why don't you take the lead?" "Why should I?" Zhong Cheng's expression turned ugly. From the moment Song Yong died, he knew that things were going to go south. He didn't think that someone would risk his life for money. If he had known, he wouldn't have done such a thing even if he was beaten to death. But since he was already dead, there was no point in thinking about it. Thinking about the 100,000 soldiers in the city and the less than 50,000 5-star army outside the city, he regained his courage. But now, the commander was asking him to fight the 5-star army. Wasn't that the same as asking him to die? He wasn't stupid enough to agree to it. Everyone knew that it was easy to gain merits by being the vanguard, but it was also very dangerous. Perhaps if it was another ambitious general, he would fight for this position. But as a member of the Zhong clan in the capital, he had an incomparable background. He came to the Liaodong region just to gain experience. He didn't need such a great merit. Only then did he refuse without even thinking about it. Sitting on the right was the commander, Yi Ligong. He was a handsome middle-aged man in his early 30s. To be able to reach this position and become a rank 3 general, it wasn't because he had a powerful background. Instead, he relied on his own efforts to get to where he was today. It could be said that whether it was in terms of intelligence or bravery, he was one of the top 5 people in the Liaodong region. Yi Ligong, who could be called an all-rounder, knew his fate the moment he heard the guard say that Zhong Cheng had killed Song Yong at the city gates. He was so angry that he called Zhong Cheng a stupid pig. Just watch, because this person is likely to bury all of us in the city. Even on the battlefield, killing a general of the 5-star army wasn't a big deal. In a battle between 2 armies, who wouldn't die? But killing an unarmed envoy was completely different. That was openly breaking the rules and slapping Bugnam of Gojoseon's face. Who was Bugnam of Gojoseon? He was an existence on par with the Southern and Beiming emperors. In terms of territory, he wasn't much worse. He was just someone with a lower reputation. How could such a person be so easy to provoke? Who was Zhong Cheng? His family had some reputation in the capital, and he had made some money in the past few years. Did he really think that he was invincible and could do whatever he wanted? Did he think that he could kill people without following the rules? From that moment on, Yi Ligong had sentenced Zhong Cheng to death, and now, Zhong Cheng was openly disobeying the commander's orders. Yi Ligong didn't know what to say about this person. It seemed that the word stupid wasn't enough to describe him. Sure enough, as soon as Zhong Cheng refused, Song Quan flew into a rage. General Zhong, do you think I'm negotiating with you? Let me tell you, this is a military order. If you don't obey, you will be punished according to military law. The so-called punishment according to military law was beheading. Zhong Cheng, who felt that things were not going well, pointed at Song Quan and said, "Commander, you can't do this. Over the years, our Zhong family has given you a lot of money. Shut up. If you dare to mess around, you will be slapped 30 times, Song Quan said angrily. That's right. Over the years, he had been able to secure his position because he had given a lot of money to the higher-ups. He had no choice but to do so. If he hadn't done so, he would have been schemed against by others. Among them, the Zhong family had paid a lot of money. If it was in the past, even if it was because of this, he would not do anything to Zhong Cheng. But now, seeing that Tren City was about to fall and he was about to die, how could he still be threatened by Zhong Cheng? Chapter 11:43. Zhong Cheng finally shut his mouth after hearing Song Quan's 30 slaps. He could tell that Song Quan was going to abandon him. Now that he was under someone else's roof, he had no choice but to lower his head. He thought to himself that when he had the chance to spread the news, he would definitely tell his family about this. After that, he could only reluctantly agree. Since Commander has given the order, Zhong Cheng will follow it. I will go and arrange for people to defend the city. Zhong Cheng walked out of the hall, leaving Song Quan and Yi Ligong behind. Thinking about the unfavorable situation, Song Quan asked, "Commander, I'm afraid that Zhong Cheng alone won't be able to stop the 5-star army's attack. I heard that the 4th Infantry Division is mainly armed with firearms." "Yes, how could I not know that I can't stop them? But do we have a choice?" Song Quan slowly opened his eyes and said with a sigh. Then, as if he thought of something, he looked at Yi Ligong and said, "You are different from me. You are an orphan, your parents are long gone, and your wife is newly married. She is currently in Terran City. The court doesn't have any evidence against you, so you don't have to die like you. With your ability, even if you join the 5-star army, you will have a bright future." "Lord Commander, I've never had such thoughts," Yi Ligong hurriedly explained. Song Quan interrupted him and said, "All these years, how could I not know what kind of person you are? It's just that there is no need to make unnecessary sacrifices. Moreover, Bugnam of Gojoseon is indeed a dragon among men. I know that he is very good to the Han people, so he should be good to the Han generals as well. With him, the Han people's status will be higher and their lives will be better. Isn't this what we want to see? Sigh, if it wasn't for my family, I would also consider joining the 5-star army and fight for Bugnam of Gojoseon, fighting for the Han people's future." Yi Ligong would never have thought that Song Quan would be the one to say such heartfelt words. For a moment, he was stunned and didn't know what to say. Just like what Song Quan said, Yi Ligong had a good impression of the five-star army. Especially after learning about their deeds from various intelligence reports, he admired them even more. However, due to his identity and faction, he had no choice but to hide it in his heart. Now, the choice was right in front of him. He had gone from being a bystander to being in the situation. It would be a lie to say that Yi Ligong did not have any ideas about where to go from here. However, when he thought about how everything he had today was all because of Song Quan's recommendation, he could not let down this benefactor in his life. And now, it was this noble person who was advising him to surrender to the enemy. His heart, which had been suppressed, began to stir again. Yi Ligong did not immediately object, which was equivalent to expressing his attitude. How could Song Quan not know? He continued, Ligong, it's not that I don't have any selfish motives. You know, my family is in the capital. When I'm around, naturally, no one dares to bully them. However, once I leave, it's hard to say. If one day, and I'm saying if, you have a firm foothold among the 5 stars, please help my family if possible. This is also my last request to you. Commander, please don't say that. If I can survive this time, your family will be my family, and your parents will be my parents. Yi Ligong immediately swore. Good. Song Quan patted Yi Ligong's shoulder with a gratified expression. The last worry in his life had been removed, and he could finally go without worry. Outside the city, Ling Dechong called the 4 commanders under him over and seriously discussed the plan to attack the city. It wasn't easy to get a chance to attack, and everyone's opinion was surprisingly unanimous. They were not in a hurry to attack the city. First, they would scare the enemy and let them know that sometimes it wasn't easy to die even if they wanted to. 4 hours later, after the 4th Lu Division was fully prepared to attack the city, the first gunshot rang out. With the Type 95 firearms that could easily fire from 300 to 400 meters away, when the gunshots rang out, the Ming soldiers guarding Terran City became live targets. Many of them even had bows and arrows in their hands as they stuck their heads out of the battlements, waiting for the 5-star army to come closer. Bullets flew over and accurately hit their bodies. This was simply an unfair and unequal battle. One side could attack as they pleased, while the other side could only passively take a beating. They couldn't even see the appearance of their opponents clearly, but hundreds of Ming soldiers were hit. Some died on the spot, while others were injured by gunshots and fell to the ground screaming in pain. If they died, then so be it, everything would be over. But those who were injured by gunshots, when their cries of pain rang out from the battlements, the shock it brought to their comrades was so great that it completely exceeded the expectations of the defending general, Zhong Cheng. He originally thought that with the advantage of numbers, they would be able to fight evenly with the 5-star army. In addition, they had the higher ground and were relying on the city walls, so it wasn't impossible for them to push back the 5-star army. But after this exchange, Zhong Cheng realized how wrong he was. As the headquarters of the new Ergon Sea, it was where the commander was located. Beishir also placed great importance on it, and once sent people to send over 200 firearms. They had always been treated as treasures and kept in the armory. This time, Zhong Cheng even took them out, wanting to properly display their power. But after this exchange, these seemingly treasured firearms were completely useless, unable to pose any threat to the 5-star army. They couldn't even attack from a certain distance, so how could they display their power? Zhong Cheng, who was on top of the city gate tower, saw that more and more soldiers were dying and the number of injured was increasing. The soldiers guarding the city were terrified because of this. More and more soldiers hid behind the city gate tower and didn't even dare to show their heads. Zhong Cheng couldn't help but be furious. He loudly ordered everyone to shoot arrows outside the city. Since the general had given the order, the soldiers below didn't dare to disobey. Helpless, they could only risk their lives and shoot arrows outside. But very quickly, those who showed their heads didn't have a good ending. Out of 10 people, at least half of them were hit or injured, and the remaining half had their arrows shot to God knows where, unable to pose any threat to the outside world. Under the constant orders, the number of injured and dead increased, and the morale of the Biming army continued to drop. Having completely lost the initiative, the Biming army could only take a beating and hide. Outside of Terran City, the fourth Master Lu's attack shocked everyone. Behind them, the 20,000 North Korean soldiers who were preparing to attack, as well as the 10,000 Biming soldiers who surrendered along the way, were also shocked. They originally thought that with the enemy's high walls and the commander personally leading the attack, this attack would be extremely difficult, and who knew how many lives would be lost here. This was especially true for the Biming soldiers who had surrendered. Thinking about how they had just escaped from the tiger's den and into the wolf's den, they felt extremely uncomfortable. But who would have thought that when the attack started, the situation would be one-sided? The Terran City Biming soldiers, who had the advantage in numbers, didn't even have the ability to retaliate. When this scene fell into everyone's eyes, many of the soldiers were extremely excited. The situation on the battlefield was completely out of their expectations, and it gave them hope, a chance to perform meritorious deeds. General, the North Korean soldiers and the Biming army who surrendered are asking if we can attack the city now. Ling Dechong was still smiling as he watched his soldiers flaunt their might when the messenger walked over and reported. There's no rush, there's no rush. Ling Dechong waved his hand and laughed. Tell them that it's not time for them to attack yet. Let's fight for a while longer and completely destroy their morale. That's when we'll be able to win this battle, ha ha ha. Ling Dechong was very familiar with his weapons, and he was even more familiar with the power of his weapons. He knew that if he wanted to obtain the greatest victory with the smallest price, he couldn't rush it. In any case, he had brought a lot of bullets with him this time, so he treated it as giving the soldiers a chance to shoot. They didn't charge, and bullets continued to fly. For hours later, the sky turned dark and everything became quiet. More and more injured soldiers were carried down from the city walls. Cries of pain and anguish could be heard everywhere. When the Biming soldiers who hadn't entered the battlefield heard this, their faces turned pale and their expressions changed greatly. Facing an enemy who could easily kill you from a distance without even facing you head-on, they didn't have much of a chance of winning. They all thought in their hearts, if it were them, how much confidence would they have in winning? The commanding general, Zhong Cheng, also had a dejected look on his face. He originally thought that with his advantages, he would be able to fight on par with the five-star army. If things went well, he would be able to defeat them. That would be an outstanding military achievement. Who would have thought that the result would be like this? After fighting for 4 hours, they couldn't even touch the corner of their opponent's clothes. He only got the result of more than 300 soldiers being killed and more than 1,000 injured. Of course, what was worse was that the morale of the soldiers had been greatly damaged. If this continued tomorrow, he really didn't dare to imagine how the army would be able to continue fighting if they didn't have any combat power. General Zhong, the commander has ordered you to come to his residence to discuss military matters. One of Song Quan's soldiers came in front of Zhong Cheng. I understand. Zhong Cheng nodded expressionlessly. Lead the way. In fact, Zhong Cheng was prepared to go to Song Quan even without him coming to find him. There was no way to fight a war like this, and there was no way to win it. He wanted to resign from his position as the general of the city defense. The commander's residence was brightly lit at this moment. When Zhong Cheng arrived, he saw a busy scene. He saw many people walking in and out, and they were carrying all kinds of things in their hands. It felt like they were moving house. Zhong Cheng, who didn't understand what was going on, strode into the main hall and saw Song Quan and the commander, Li Gong, sitting there. Chapter 1144. Commander, what are the people outside busy with? Zhong Cheng asked in confusion after entering the hall. General Zhong, don't ask so many questions. Let me ask you, what are your thoughts after today's battle with the five-star army? Do you think we can defend Tren City with just us? Song Quan didn't answer Zhong Cheng's question. Instead, he took the initiative to ask about the battle. Sigh. At the mention of this matter, Zhong Cheng's face was ashen as he said, don't mention it. The firearms in the hands of the five-star army are simply too powerful. They can even shoot from afar and are extremely accurate. We didn't even see their shadows, and we've already lost over 1,000 people. If this battle continues like this, there's really no way to continue. Oh, So that means we won't be able to defend the city? Song Quan asked again. That's right. We can't defend it. This time, Zhong Cheng answered honestly. If that's the case, what does General Zhong think about breaking out of the encirclement? Song Quan asked as he already expected Zhong Cheng to say this. Breaking out of the encirclement? This question was completely out of Zhong Cheng's expectations. Then, he remembered that when he entered the mansion, he saw those people moving things back and forth. He immediately understood that Song Quan was preparing to escape. Seeing that Zhong Cheng seemed to be thinking about something, Song Quan looked at Yi Ligong on the other side. The two of them looked at each other and nodded. Song Quan said to Zhong Cheng again, That's right, we should break out of the encirclement. You know the situation this afternoon. The 5-star army has very powerful firearms. It's not something we can stop. If we don't break out of the encirclement early, once they attack with this method, I'm afraid we won't even have a chance. Yes, Commander, you're right. But isn't it too rushed to break out of the encirclement tonight? After seeing the power of the 5-star army, Zhong Cheng agreed with this decision. However, he still felt that breaking out of the encirclement now was too rushed. He didn't even have the slightest bit of preparation. It's not rushed. Who can guarantee that the 5-star army won't attack the city tomorrow? If that's the case, I'm afraid we won't even have a chance to break through. Seeing that Zhong Cheng didn't immediately object, Song Quan continued to persuade him. The 5-star army was indeed powerful. No one knew what kind of attack they would launch tomorrow. In the end, Zhong Cheng nodded and agreed. Let's break through the encirclement then. I just don't know what kind of plan the commander has. I've already discussed this matter with Yi Qian. Let's do it like this tonight. In the middle of the night, dark clouds covered the moonlight and the sky was completely dark. Looking at Talon City from afar, other than the moving torches on the city walls, which were soldiers patrolling, everything else was pitch black. It gave off a very quiet feeling. However, the atmosphere suddenly changed. The originally quiet city was suddenly filled with rumbling sounds. Then, the west gate was opened and a large group of people rushed out. They appeared like a whirlwind and rushed towards the river guards. After the west gate was opened, the south gate opened as well. Unlike the other gates, the south gate remained silent after it was opened. Not a single soldier walked out from it. The contrast between the two was very obvious. Outside the south gate, Yang Qindong, who had already changed into a golden cloak, was slowly approaching under the protection of 1,000 Black Knights. Behind the Black Knights were tens of thousands of North Korean soldiers and 10,000 Ming army soldiers. They arrived at the south gate unhurriedly. Then, they entered as if there was no one around. Just like that, they entered the city through the gate openly. They didn't encounter any obstruction or resistance during the process. In the commander's residence of Talon City, the commander, Song Quan, had already committed suicide in the courtyard. A white cloth was covering his body and a group of soldiers were kneeling on both sides of him. When Yang Chendong arrived, he saw this scene. Greetings, Bugnam of Gojoseon. The moment Yang Chendong entered the courtyard, everyone, led by Yi Ligong, fell to their knees. Sigh, a proper burial. After Beta Persei opened the white cloth and confirmed that the deceased was indeed Song Quan, Yang Chendong sighed emotionally. Thank you, Bugnam of Gojoseon. With Yi Ligong as the leader, everyone kowtowed once again. Song Quan died just like that. Perhaps he knew that if he didn't die, his family in Ming wouldn't be safe, so he sacrificed himself in exchange for everyone's lives. Yi Ligong knew the whole plan. He really wanted to prevent his benefactor from dying, but he also knew that it was useless. Song Quan's survival meant that his family in Ming had to die. There was no other choice but to sacrifice one person in exchange for everyone's lives. And before Song Quan died, he still did a lot of things. He really needed Yi Ligong to take care of his family in the future, so he first arranged for Zhong Cheng, who was a thorn in his side, to leave the city. Then, he handed over all the military and political power to Yi Ligong, and then died peacefully. After Yi Ligong learned of the plan, he secretly sent someone to contact Yang Chendong. This was how the 5-star army safely entered the city and took over everything. You're Yi Ligong. Let's talk inside. Yang Chendong already knew everything that had happened. He couldn't do anything about Song Quan's choice, but he also admired him. He was full of curiosity about Yi Ligong. What kind of person could make Song Quan sacrifice himself to protect him? Could he really guarantee that Yi Ligong would fulfill his promise after his death? In the main hall of the commander's residence, Peng Yu, Ba Daojiang, and the others, who had transformed into Long Wei, carefully inspected the place. After confirming that there were no problems, Yang Chendong stepped into the hall, followed by Yi Ligong, the commander-in-chief. Yang Chendong sat down on the main seat, while Yi Ligong stood with his hands by his side. The two of them sized each other up. In the entire Liaodong region, Yi Ligong was an extremely famous existence. He was different from Tong Long. Although he was extremely courageous, he had relied on the help of his family to get to where he was today. Yi Ligong had relied entirely on himself. He had relied on his ability to wield both the pin and the sword to reach the position of commander-in-chief. For this reason, when the Liaodong cavalry was established, Fang Dingshan had personally appointed him as his deputy, but Song Quan had stopped him in the end. How could such a person not attract Yang Chendong's attention? Originally, he had wanted to see his ability in the Battle of Terran City, but he hadn't expected that the other party would surrender without even putting up a basic resistance. Of course, it was a good thing that he could take the initiative to surrender to him. Subduing the enemy without a fight, this was the highest level of victory in battle. And the person behind all of this was Yi Ligong. So Yang Chendong was naturally very interested in him. Bugnam of Gojoseon, the surrendered general, has a request. While Yang Chendong was sizing up the other party, Yi Ligong had already knelt down on the ground again. "How dare you?" Beta Persei shouted from the side. "You're just a surrendered general. What right do you have to make a request?" "Yes, the surrendered general knows that he's not qualified, but I hope that Bugnam of Gojoseon will agree to this request." Thump, thump, thump. His forehead hit the ground 3 times in a row, and soon blood flowed from his forehead. It was obvious that he had used a lot of strength. "Let's hear it." Yang Chendong stretched out his hand to stop Beta Persei's next action and looked at Yi Ligong, who was kneeling on the ground, with interest. Now that he had a chance to speak, Yi Ligong said, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, Commander Song committed suicide to save the people of Terran City from the flames of war. If there's a chance one day, please clear his name. Thank you." When he sent a secret envoy to Yang Chendong to beg for surrender, he had said not to make things difficult for the people of Terran City. At that time, Yang Chendong had also agreed. However, he didn't say anything about clearing Song Quan's name. Now that Yi Ligong had suddenly brought it up, even Yang Chendong frowned slightly after hearing it. "General Yi, why didn't you mention this when you sent people to beg for surrender?" Reporting to Bugnam of Gojoseon, when Commander Song was still here, everything was led by him. There are some things that a surrendered general can't say clearly. The secret envoy in charge of the surrender was arranged by Song Quan. Of course, he wouldn't mention clearing his name after death. In fact, he didn't even think about such a thing. What he cared about was the safety of his family in the capital and the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians in Terran City. Since Song Quan didn't mention it, Yi Ligong could not mention it. Now that he had the opportunity to talk to Yang Chendong, he brought it up. Yang Chendong nodded slightly with a look of understanding. Then, he looked at the kneeling Yi Ligong and asked with a smile, "You want this king to clear Song Quan's name? Aren't you worried that this king will be defeated and killed one day? If that's the case, clearing his name will be meaningless." There was a prerequisite for clearing Song Quan's name, and that was that Yang Chendong could succeed. Otherwise, not only would the matter of clearing his name be a joke, it would also bring great trouble to Song Quan's family. No. Although the surrendered general only lives in a remote corner, he has long heard of the 5-star Army's love for the people. A king who cares about the people of the world, how can his future be limited? This surrendered general boldly believes that the world will eventually belong to Bugnam of Gojoseon. Yi Ligong was also smart. He took the opportunity to explain and flatter Yang Chendong. Bootlicker, Beta Persei, who was standing at the side, said softly. How could these words escape the ears of Yang Chendong, who had entered the quasi-grandmaster realm? However, he didn't care. Instead, he chuckled and asked, "General Yi, you said that this king cares about the people in his heart. Are the Ming Emperor and the Southern Ming Emperor not the same?" "It's not the same," Yi Ligong shook his head. If he was still the Ming commandant, there were some things that he couldn't say even if he thought about it. Otherwise, it would be a choice, and it would be treacherous. But now, since he had chosen to surrender to the five-star army, he naturally didn't have any concerns. Chapter 1145. The Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty talks about the safety of the people, but in reality, it is only for the stability of the regime. In their eyes, the officials and the major clans of the world are seeking benefits, finding a balance between them, and consolidating the regime. Bugnam of Gojoseon is indeed different. Because of your appearance, the status of the Han people in the world has been raised by more than one level. This can be seen from yesterday when you only besieged the city and did not immediately attack. Based on this point, the surrendered general believes that you are a sincere ruler. After Yi Ligong finished speaking, he once again knelt on the ground, as if he had said all that he should say and would let Yang Chendong deal with him. The words just now were indeed the words of Yi Ligong's trusted aide. But how could it not be a representation? Presumably, in the entire Great Ming Dynasty, there should be many generals with such knowledge. When Yang Chendong heard this, he was naturally gratified. At least there was someone who understood what he did. Good. I have to say, General Yi, your words really made me happy. Since that is the case, I will agree to your request. Once this prince has enough ability, I will definitely clear General Song Quan's name. And as you said, this prince does not want to see the Han people and the Ming army kill each other. There are still many cities in the Liaodong region that have not been captured. I don't know if you can do your part to help this prince. Yang Chendong took a fancy to Yi Ligong's identity as a commander. It would be more convenient for him to do some things than the dead Song Yong. In addition, he intended to test the other party's ability, so he spoke out. The surrendered general is duty-bound. How could Yi Ligong, who wanted to take the opportunity to show his ability, not agree? The surrendered general thanks Bugnam of Gojoseon for promising to clear General Song's name. Thank you again. Thump, thump, thump. He kowtowed 3 more times, and blood overflowed from his forehead. Just as the two were talking, Longwei's voice came from outside the hall. 6th Young Master, Lu 4th Division Commander Ling Daqiang requests an audience. Let him in. Yang Chendong sat up straight with a smile on his face. After a dozen breaths of time, Ling Daqiang entered the hall with a wooden box in his hands. He knelt down in front of Yang Chendong, who was wearing a golden cloak. 6th Young Master, I was able to accomplish my mission. Zhong Cheng has been killed. This is his head. Poor Zhong Cheng. He didn't even know that he had been betrayed. They thought that Song Quan had really given the order to break out of the encirclement, but unbeknownst to them, not too far away from the southern gates, the Lu 4th master teachers were already lying in ambush. As soon as they appeared, they would surround them and eliminate them. How could Zhongqing know about this? He was still happy that he was about to escape from danger. Following that, gunshots rang out and everything ended. Zhongcheng was dead. Not only that, but his family members who followed him out of the city didn't end up well either. Most of them were captured, and his evil youngest son was also killed in the chaos. It could be said that they had avenged Song Yong. Yang Chendong didn't look at the head in the wooden box. Instead, he sighed and said, released the news that Zhongqing secretly escaped from the city and created an opportunity for the 5-star army to enter Terran City. After a series of resistance, Yi Ligong was captured and Commander Song Quan died in battle. As soon as Yang Chendong said this, Yi Ligong, who had just stood up, revealed a grateful expression. By pushing all the blame to the dead Zhongcheng, Song Quan's family members in Ming capital would be safe. Beta Persei agreed and immediately sent someone to spread the news. Yang Chenong asked Yi Ligong to stay behind and asked him about the Liaodong region. Yi Ligong already had thoughts of joining Yang Chendong, so he naturally told him everything he knew. Bugnam of Gojoseon, before the Liaodong region was renamed as the new Ergon Dusi region, I followed Commander Song Quan here. I don't know everything here, but I know 90% of it. Let's start with the most powerful place, the Jianzhou Guards. Yi Ligong was indeed worthy of being chosen by Song Quan. He knew the situation here very well. Many of the things he said were the same as the information sent by the intelligence department. There were also some things that even the intelligence department didn't know. Okay. Seeing Yi Ligong stop talking, Yang Qindong laughed heartily and slapped his thigh. It seems that General Yi is indeed very familiar with the situation here. If that's the case, I wonder if you can persuade the nearby guard stations that haven't been taken down by our 5-star army? Yi Ligong didn't immediately answer. Instead, after thinking for a moment, he raised his head. It shouldn't be a problem. If Bugnam of Gojoseon trusts this Yi, then leave this matter to me. Seeing Yi Ligong so confident, Yang Qindong was even more happy. Okay, I'll leave this matter to you. How many soldiers do you need? There's no need. I'll just bring some personal guards. However, I hope that Bugnam of Gojoseon can give me some silver. This isn't to bribe anyone. It's just that some places are too poor. They can't even pay the soldiers. Speaking of this, Yi Ligong felt a bit embarrassed. After all, he was the commander of the Liaodong region. Logically speaking, he was in charge of the finances. If he said that there wasn't any pay for the soldiers, it really was a loss of face. Before coming, Yang Qindong had done his research. Although Zhu Qiyu had indeed earned quite a bit of money through the newly opened Zhu Family Bank, the lives of the soldiers weren't that good. For example, the Liaodong cavalry on the grasslands were still fine. They could be paid on time. However, the Liaodong region, which was too far away from the capital, couldn't do so. Every time it was time to pay, all sorts of reasons would be used to reduce it. As time passed, the silver became more and more insufficient. Knowing that this wasn't Yi Ligong's fault, Yang Qindong stood up and patted him on the shoulder. This king knows the situation. You don't have to feel burdened. How about this? I'll give you 1,000,000 taels of silver. You can go and solve the problem. Not only the soldiers, but also the common people. You can help them. If it's still not enough, you can come and find this king. He didn't expect Yang Qindong to be so generous and benevolent. 1,000,000 taels of silver was equivalent to half a year's salary for the Liaodong guard post. Yi Ligong patted his chest and promised, Bugnam of Gojoseon, don't worry. The silver will definitely be distributed to the soldiers and the common people. Your righteous deeds will also be known to the common people. Yi Ligong knew very well that Yang Qindong was trying to buy people's hearts. However, he also liked to do this kind of thing. If Zhu Qiyu had been willing to take out silver to buy people's hearts, the Liaodong guard post wouldn't have been so weak. Song Yong wouldn't have been able to convince several guard posts in succession. In the end, it was all because they didn't have money. Terran City was finally taken. The loss of the Liaodong guard post in the north also meant that the plan to invade Liaodong was already half successful. Yang Qindong didn't cheer because of this. He knew that once the news spread, Zhu Qiyu would definitely send reinforcements. If he didn't defeat these people, he would tell the acting emperor that Liaodong was no longer under his control and make him give up. This was the most important thing. The new army was still madly sweeping through the Liaodong guard post. All the guard posts they wanted to attack either surrendered early on or were defeated in the first battle. Except for a few soldiers who had a certain amount of fighting power, most of the guard posts were under their control. With the world's first cavalry division acting as a huge mountain blocking the Sa-Chao River Guard's front line, it suppressed the northern Ming army from advancing north for a long time. It was only when the northern Ming sent out reinforcements, with General Li Tong at the head of 200,000 troops, that the Liaodong guards were greatly encouraged and saw hope. During this time, Yi Ligong completed the task given to him by Yang Qindong very well. He integrated the guard posts in the Terran City, which included more than 20,000 surrendered soldiers from Baiming. The 100,000 soldiers in the Gatling City and the 10,000 surrendered soldiers that Yang Qindong brought along made a total of 130,000 soldiers. Yang Qindong naturally wouldn't be polite with such a force. Then he made a shocking decision. He changed the name of the Liaodong guard post to the 3 eastern provinces and used one of his students as the governor, a person named Lu Ji. Although Lu Ji was Yang Qindong's student, he was actually older than Yang Qindong. But in the spirit of learning without precedence, he was still convinced by Yang Qindong's knowledge, entered the Yang Family Academy, and became an excellent teacher. Because he was very good at management, he was promoted to the position of governor of the 3 eastern provinces. The position of general of the 3 eastern provinces was given to Yi Ligong. Not only that, He was allowed to have 100,000 soldiers, 30,000 of which could be cavalry. When the matter was announced, Yi Gong, who didn't cry easily, failed to live up to expectations and shed tears. Then he secretly swore in his heart that a gentleman would die for his friend and follow Yang Chendong for the rest of his life. General Yi, I'll leave you with 1,000,000 taels of silver. In the future, you'll be paid on time every month. However, I'll leave the matters of the army to you. You must seize the opportunity to train. You must train a strong army so that General Song Quan can rest assured in the underworld. Yang Chendong said earnestly to Yi Gong, Bugnam of Gojoseon, don't worry. We will train hard, but if you call, we will come. Yi Gong solemnly promised. After solving the problem of the Liaodong guard post, Yang Chendong brought the 4th Division, 20,000 North Korean soldiers, and 10,000 Ming surrendered soldiers down south. In just 4 months, after leaving the Japanese Empire, Yang Chendong had taken over the Shuangqing Guards and the Saha River Guards as the front line. He was already halfway to his goal of taking over the Liaodong guard post. However, Yang Chendong was very clear that although it seemed like he had taken over half of the territory, it was just a barren land. There weren't many Ming army there either. The truly powerful ones were the remaining half, which was the Liaodong guard post near the capital of Ming. Chapter 1146. But no matter what, the initial goal had been achieved. The new supply line had been opened. He had already sent a telegram to order the Korean province to transport the various supplies that had been hoarded over the past few days by sea. Once the supplies arrived at Shur City on the grasslands, it would be even more difficult for anyone to deal with them. When the news of the supply line being opened reached the northern Ming dynasty's court, Zhu Qiyu, the acting patriarch, was truly anxious. Destroying Yang Chendong's arrangements in the grasslands and even uprooting them was what he had been doing for the past year. If he failed to do so, not only would he have wasted more than a year, but it would also greatly affect the morale of the army. Zhu Qiyu definitely did not want to see such a thing happen. Although he was not fully prepared, he still sent an order to the Ming commander Shi Hong on the grasslands front line. He ordered the Walla army's troops, Yes Hin, to go to Shur City. No matter what, they had to solve the problem before the 5-star army's supplies arrived. At the same time, Zhu Qiyu sent someone to quickly inform General Li Tong, who had already sent troops and was about to reach the Liaodong region. In the face of the 5-star army, they had to win and not lose, even if it was a draw. In short, they had to block the main force of the 5-star army in the Liaodong region so that they could not support Grassland City. The emperor gave orders one after another, and the situation in the Liaodong region became extremely tense. On the grasslands, the war was about to break out, and the situation was even more grim. With Su Yozhin's insider, the news about Zhu Qiyu's plan to attack Shur City was quickly sent over via telegram. After the new army's commander, Tiger's Mane, and the mayor, Yu Mian, discussed, they immediately ordered the entire city to be under martial law and to strictly investigate the identity of the people who had recently arrived. As the person in charge of logistics, Yang Si led the soldiers to start planting mines to block the joint attack of the Ming army and the Walla cavalry. Compared to the slow telegram, the Ming commander Shi Hong, who had already occupied Tulu City, only received the news of the emperor's order to send troops on the 4th day. What are you doing? We'll attack immediately. Our army hasn't been fully assembled yet, and our provisions haven't arrived yet. Shi Hong looked at the imperial edict in front of him with dissatisfaction. However, when he saw Zhu Qiyu repeatedly say urgent at the end of the imperial edict, he knew that there were some things that he could not decide. Forget it. Send out the troops. Order the general at the vanguard to take 20,000 soldiers and leave first. We'll talk about it after we've created some momentum. Shi Hong only did this because he wanted to complete the decree. He wanted to create some momentum to complete his task. However, what he didn't expect was that not long after the vanguard army left Tala City, they were ambushed by a new army before they even reached the beginning city. In just over half a day, the vanguard army was defeated. More than 10,000 people were killed and captured. In the end, only about 50,000 people managed to escape. After being hit in the head, Shi Hong finally calmed down. He knew that in the face of such a powerful opponent like the 5-star army, All kinds of accidents could happen if he was a little careless. Therefore, he suppressed the urge on the imperial edict and nervously contacted Yesin, asking him to send troops to cooperate. At the same time, he called back 70,000 Liaodong cavalry and made preparations to attack the beginning city. In the beginning city, the commander of the new army, Tiger's Mane, was cheering for the victory of the first battle. However, after learning about Shi Heng's preparations from the intelligence personnel, he didn't dare to be careless. While doing the strict defense of the city, he sent a telegram to Yang Chendong and reported in detail what had happened here. Yang Chendong, who was rushing to the Twin City Guard, didn't look happy at all after seeing the telegram. Instead, his eyebrows were knitted together again. Young master, shouldn't Tiger's Mane be happy after winning the battle? Beta Persei, who was following beside him, noticed the change in Yang Chendong and asked with some confusion. Yes, you should be happy after winning the battle. It's just that this first battle has been won. I'm afraid that the next battle won't be so easy. With this lesson, do you think the Ming army will still underestimate the enemy? Yang Chendong nodded first, then looked at Beta Persei in a rhetorical manner. Beta Persei didn't know how to answer this question. He could only touch his head and chuckle. It's okay. With Tiger's Mane there won't be any problems in the beginning city. I also believe in Tiger's Mane. There won't be any problems in the short term, but it's hard to say after a long time. So we have to speed up. We can't continue to wait. In this way, order the entire army to speed up. Yang Chendong nodded. Although Tiger's Mane had never complained, Yang Chendong could imagine that after not receiving any supplies for more than a year, even if there were some stocks before, there wouldn't be much left now. Under the order of Yang Chendong, the army once again sped up. Meanwhile, at this time, 200 li southwest of their destination, Twin Cities Guard, Northern Ming's 200,000 reinforcements had already arrived, moreover gathering together with Jian Province's left guard General Chen Do. Since Tong Long was captured with 3,000 cavalry, Chen Dula retreated into his shell like a tortoise and never came out again. Even if he could see the scattered 5-star army's cavalry scouts nearby, he still turned a blind eye to them. It wasn't until he heard that the 200,000 reinforcements sent by the emperor had arrived that he hurriedly left the city and brought some provisions and military supplies out. Speaking of which, Chen Dula and Li Tong were old acquaintances. Although they weren't very close, they could still be considered old friends. When they met again, there was no need to be polite. Perhaps they also knew that they were now grasshoppers on the same rope, and they couldn't run away from each other. General Chen, the situation isn't good. The 5-star army is coming aggressively. I'm afraid it won't be easy to deal with them. After Li Tong greeted Chen Dula, he entered the temporary tent to discuss the situation in front of him. General Li is right. The 5-star army's combat power is strong and not easy to deal with. To be honest, not long ago, my commander knew that Tong Long wasn't convinced, so he rushed out with 3,000 cavalry, and the result? Li Tong, who had been rushing, didn't know what happened to Tong Long, so he asked out of curiosity. Just as the words left his mouth, Li Tong thought of something. Looking at Chen Dula's serious and gloomy expression, he already knew the result, so he could only shake his head. I have to say, the Bugnam of Gojoseon is really not easy to deal with. That's right, they have the world's strongest cavalry, and at the same time, they have the world's most powerful firearms. Most importantly, they seem to have endless wealth, and until now, it's difficult to restrict them with money. When Chen Dula said this, he could only helplessly shake his head. Anyone who had one of these was already very powerful, not to mention all three. With such an opponent, even if you had a lot of troops, you wouldn't be able to gain any advantages. After hearing this, Li Tong was silent for a while. Then he raised his head and said, General Chen's words don't necessarily have to boost the morale of others and reduce our own morale. Chen Dula knew that Li Tong had seen the seriousness of the situation. The reason why he said this was because Li Tong was the main general, and he needed to boost his morale. That was why he said this. For this reason, he decided to give Li Tong some face and didn't expose him. Instead, he asked, General Li, how are you going to deal with the enemy? Are you going to use these 200,000 people to attack and take back everything that you've lost? No. Li Tong quickly shook his head. The opponent is a cavalry team. and in terms of speed, we are no match for them. It's better to defend. Besides, the Emperor's intention is very clear. He wants us to guard here and stop Bugnam of Gojoseon from assisting the Grasslands beginning city. If we do this well, it will be a great achievement. Li Tong was very clear about his position, which made Shindula feel very gratified. General Li is indeed a talented commander. I deeply agree with this. You have to know that Tong Long didn't gain any advantages when he led 3,000 elite cavalry previously. Haha, great minds think alike. Li Tong laughed heartily at the sky after hearing that. Using a defensive battle to hold back Bugnam of Gojoseon's army and prevent them from assisting the beginning city. This was the plan that Li Tong had set for the 200,000 troops. If the truth was really like what he did, it could indeed give Yang Chendong a headache. Although it would definitely not be able to block it, it could play the role of stalling for time. In this way, the beginning city would be in danger. The policy was right, but in the end, it still depended on who carried it out. Just like the laws and governments issued by many countries, they were all for the purpose of the people. However, when it was really in the hands of the people, it might be completely different. Just like now, Tong Long, who they were just talking about, had now returned to the Jin Province Left Guard and met his own people here. In the Jin Province Left Guard, in terms of population, although the Han people were more than the Nuzanren, in terms of overall strength, especially influence, the Nuzanren was not just a little bit stronger. This might have something to do with the Nuzanren being more united than the Han people, or perhaps it was because they had lived in this area for generations, allowing them to adapt better to the environment here. In short, the Nuzanren's influence in the Jin Province Left Guard was far greater than that of the Han people. Even the commander, Chindola, had to act according to her mood. Not to mention that Chindola was not in the city now. It was just a small matter of quietly entering the city, so Tong Long naturally did it. Not only did he enter the city, but he also met his father, Tong Sheng, a burly man who was taller than an ordinary person. When Tong Sheng was young, he was definitely a person who could tremble with a stomp of his feet in this area. In addition, he had the support of a group of old brothers, so he had done a lot of things. For example, the nearby caravans must pay the toll to them. Otherwise, their safety could not be guaranteed. It was also because Tong Sheng did not understand the Han culture. Otherwise, with his economic strength and influence, he would have long become a general among the Baiming generals. In the end, the things that the old man couldn't do were handed over to his son. Fortunately, Tong Long lived up to expectations. With the support of his family, he finally walked to the position of commander and became a secondary grade 3 military officer. Chapter 1147. With Tong Long's good performance, Tong Sheng was like a tiger that had grown wings. In the big city of the Jianzhou Left Guard, there was no one who dared to not give him face. However, all of this changed when Tong Long and his 3,000 elite cavalrymen suddenly disappeared. Tong Sheng and Tong Long were father and son. One was a businessman while the other was an official. When one of them was missing, the problem naturally arose. The cake was only so big, and most of it was still controlled by the Tong family. Now that there was finally a chance to redistribute it, who would give up this opportunity? During this period of time, the Tong family had become the target of public criticism. They had become the target of everyone's attacks, both openly and secretly. Even Shindula, as the commander, had begun to take sides, as if he wanted to help another family rise in the city. The Tong clan's days became harder and harder, and they were getting worse day by day. At this moment, Tong Long suddenly appeared in front of his father, which made Tong Sheng extremely excited. "My son, you're back? Haha, that's great. Let's see who dares to make things difficult for our Tong family this time." Tong Sheng, who had always been expressionless, actually had such a reaction after seeing his son. Just from this point alone, one could see how much pressure he had been under during this period of time and how difficult his days had been. "Father, I'm unfilial. I've had a bad start." Tong Long knelt in front of Tong Sheng and lowered his proud head. "Don't say that. Victory and defeat are common in war. It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. How about this? You can immediately go to the Yamen and restore your official position first." Tong Sheng knew that Shindula was not in the city, So he decided to restore his son's official position first and properly intimidate the other opponents in the open and in the dark. Looking at his father's wrinkled face, Tong Long swallowed his saliva first, then said in a calm voice, "Father, I can't go to the yamen." "Why? Is it because you lost the battle?" "It's fine, didn't I say? Victory and defeat are common in war. Besides, who really won against the 5-star army? It's fine, we can just spend more money." After operating in the Jianzhou left guard city for decades, Tong Shang still had some family assets. Naturally, his words were more forceful. "Money? How much money do we have now?" Speaking of this matter, Tong Long was also very curious. He only knew that the family had some extra money, but he really did not ask how much it was. It wasn't that he was ambitious, but that he didn't have any needs in this aspect. Speaking of this matter, Tong Sheng's face burst out into a smile like a blooming flower. "Son, you've finally grown up. You know how much money we have at home." "Haha, if others asked me like this, I wouldn't tell them. However, I will hand it over to you in the future. Therefore, I won't hide it from you. Listen, we've saved 300,000 taels of silver. It's not a problem for us to restore your official position with this money." 300,000 taels was undoubtedly an astronomical figure in the eyes of ordinary people. Didn't Zhong Cheng kill Song Yong for 100,000 taels of silver? In the end, he was beheaded and separated from his family. Looking at his father's proud appearance, Tong Long did not feel the slightest bit of joy. Instead, he sighed. His father had worked hard for so many years, and after operating for so many years, he only managed to save 300,000 taels of silver. Yet, he was already so happy. He didn't know if he should say that it was a kind of sorrow. In front of his father, Tong Long revealed a calm expression. His right hand slowly reached into his pocket, and then he easily took out 500,000 taels of silver. "Father, what do you think this is?" "Silver?" Tong Sheng's eyes weren't blurry, and he recognized the item in front of him at first glance. When he took a closer look, he realized that it was Yang Xie's 500,000 taels of silver. When he realized that it could be exchanged at any Yang family bank, his eyes widened. Where did this come from?" "Of course it was given to me by the 5-star army. I won't hide it from father. I am now a member of the 5-star army. Because of my outstanding strength and outstanding performance, I am now a company commander. Of course, I am confident that I can lead more troops in the future." When he spoke of this, Tong Long's arrogant side appeared again. Ever since Tong Long was captured by Commander Bai Shuang, he couldn't accept it. When he woke up and ate a large amount of food, he started to shout loudly. What he meant was that he couldn't accept it. If it wasn't for the 5-star army strategy that caused them to be exhausted, he definitely had the ability to fight it out and even win. Logically speaking, a captive shouldn't have the right to speak. Even in ancient times, such people didn't even have basic human rights. However, Bai Shuang didn't take away his right to shout. On the contrary, he got someone to release him. Not only him, the other 2,000-plus captives were also released. They were surrounded by 4 groups of 2,000 soldiers. The only difference was that one group had weapons and war horses while the other group had nothing. What are they doing? Are they trying to kill us? Since that's the case, we will fight it out with them. We don't have any weapons. Even if we bite with our teeth and tear with our hands, we can't just sit there and wait for death. Seeing their 2,000-plus men being surrounded by the 5-star army's 2,000 cavalry, many of their faces changed greatly. Some of them were already prepared to fight to the death. It had to be said that although Tong Long lost this time, the soldiers he brought still had some backbone. If it was a normal army, they would have already knelt down and begged for mercy under such circumstances. Naturally, there were also people who were calm in the crowd, such as Tong Long. He didn't believe that the other party would kill them. If that was the case, there would be no need for such a formation. Wouldn't it be better to just kill them one by one? Releasing all of them was a kind of danger in itself. Of course, it was also a kind of attitude. He didn't believe that the 5-star army didn't even have a bit of common sense. Therefore, at this moment, he wasn't nervous at all. Instead, he squinted his eyes and looked at Bai Shuang, who was wearing a black cloak. He wanted to see what the other party was up to. Just as Tong Long expected, Bai Shuang didn't give the order to kill the captives. There were so many young men with good riding skills. Most of them were Han. If he killed them just like that, even his teacher wouldn't let him off. The reason why he had brought all these people out was because he wanted to use his powerful force to subdue them. Therefore, he opened his mouth and said, "You don't have to be afraid. We don't want to kill you. We just want to prove that we are stronger than you." Oh, right. Didn't someone say that they weren't convinced? All right, we will give them a chance to show off now. No matter if it's one-on-one or many-on-many, we will accept it. But if you lose this time, please put down your pride. Oh, right. Since it's a bet, there should be some stakes. How about this? If you can win, we will let you go unconditionally. On the other hand, if you lose, you must stay and join the 5-star army. How about it? Are you serious? The moment Bai Shuang finished speaking, Tong Long was the first to ask. Of course. There are so many brothers here. How can this be a game? Plus, we always keep our words in the army. You don't have to doubt us, Bai Shuang said in an incomparably confident tone. This time, the army camp was in an uproar. This was especially true for some of the men who were confident in their strength. They had always been fearless. Now that they had a chance to prove themselves, how could they let it go? Immediately, many people began to take the initiative to sign up. They wanted to prove themselves with their own strength and also to save themselves. Bai Shuang didn't reject these people. He ordered people to bring over the war horses that were captured before. Then, he gave everyone who wanted to fight a wooden scimitar. This was originally the weapon that the 1st Cavalry Division used to train. With such a weapon, they didn't have to worry about killing people. At most, they would only suffer some minor injuries. The first to fight were the 100 captives. Their opponents were the 100 cavalry warriors of the 4th Regiment. In front of everyone, the two sides pulled apart a distance of 2 li. Then, under the shout of Bai Shuang, the temporary referee, both sides began to exert their strength and charged at each other. It had to be said that the cavalry that caught Tong Long's eye and brought out were quite strong. They charged from afar, waving their wooden scimitars and doing all kinds of difficult tricks on the horses. Loud battle cries came from their mouths. Their imposing manner was extraordinary. In comparison, the 100 soldiers of the 4th Regiment seemed to be weaker. They didn't shout or shout. Instead, they kept moving forward in silence. As they moved forward, they kept changing their formation. The 100 people quickly formed a formation of 5 tip of the arrow. Then, they collided with the 100 captives in a way that could pierce through their hearts. 1 chopstick was easily broken. 10 chopsticks couldn't be broken. When the two sides began to collide, the tip of the arrow array displayed its unique and powerful strength. Under the coordination of each other, the soldiers of the 4th Regiment only needed to take care of the enemies in front of them. As for their left, right, and back, there were naturally other comrades in charge of protecting them. This allowed them to maximize their attacking power. On the contrary, the captives were fighting for themselves. Those who had a good relationship with each other only cooperated in 2s and 3s. In the face of the tip of the arrow, which was a group of 20, it was no different from a mantis trying to stop a chariot. In just one exchange, a quarter of the 100 captives fell. Then, it was time to charge again and again, entangling the enemy. Soon, the captives realized that every time they attacked with their scimitars, they could only attack one opponent. However, there would often be multiple scimitars slashing at them. Moreover, it was continuous. One move after another, one move after another. It was impossible to guard against. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.